What if the reason you cannot sleep is not because your life is too difficult, but because your mind refuses to stop carrying things that are already over? The conversation from 3 days ago, the mistake you made 5 years ago, the person who disappointed you, the future you cannot control, the job that keeps following you home, the fear that something you love could disappear, the quiet belief that if you just think hard enough, plan carefully enough, work long enough, or worry intensely enough, you might finally make life safe. And yet here you are, tired. Your body wants to rest, but your mind is still running. One thought becomes another. One memory opens the door to another memory. One small fear becomes an entire imagined future. You replay what you should have said. You predict what might go wrong. You carry people who are no longer in the room and problems that are not happening tonight. Perhaps you have spent years trying to fix this by becoming stronger, more productive, more disciplined, more positive. Maybe you have told yourself to let go, calm down, stop overthinking, stop being angry, stop being afraid. But the mind rarely becomes peaceful because it is ordered to be peaceful. Sometimes peace begins somewhere else. It begins when you stop fighting every thought, when you stop calling every painful moment a disaster, when you realize an emotion can move through you without becoming who you are, when you understand that letting go does not mean forgetting, forgiving everything, or pretending nothing mattered. Sometimes letting go simply means refusing to carry yesterday into another night. The stories you are about to hear are about ordinary people discovering this in extraordinary moments. A man who spends his entire life trying to outrun suffering until reality finally forces him to stop. A successful professional who discovers that moving faster has not brought him any closer to peace. A woman who has eaten thousands of meals but suddenly realizes she has barely tasted her own life. A mother who learns that loving someone deeply does not give her the power to control what happens next. A man who carries one insult for days until he understands that resentment can become heavier than the original wound. A woman who finally discovers that anxiety may be speaking inside her without being the totality of who she is. A grieving daughter who begins listening to a body she has ignored for years. A man who has walked countless miles but has almost never felt the ground beneath his own feet. A family that discovers how dangerous it can be to decide too quickly whether an event is good or bad. A teacher who reveals that inner peace does not mean never feeling anger. A frightened mother who learns to hold hope without trying to hold the future still. An older woman who tastes an ordinary cup of coffee differently after realizing that nothing in life is guaranteed to return tomorrow. A lawyer who discovers that 5 minutes of stillness can become a sanctuary in the middle of a life that refuses to slow down. A restless man who searches everywhere for the perfect place to find peace, only to discover that he keeps bringing the same troubled mind with him. And finally, a man who spends decades looking for someone wise enough to save him, before realizing that no teacher can live his life, breathe his breath, or awaken in his place. These are not stories about becoming perfect. They are stories about becoming present, about impermanence, about non-attachment, about compassion, about learning to meet fear without feeding it, anger without becoming it, grief without running from it, and uncertainty without demanding an answer tonight. So, if you are listening in bed, let your body become heavy. You do not need to solve tomorrow before you sleep. You do not need to repair your entire life tonight. For now, simply listen. Let each story loosen one knot. Let each breath return you to where you actually are. And perhaps, before this journey is over, you will discover something the Buddhist path has been pointing toward for centuries. Peace is not waiting at the end of your problems. It begins the moment you stop abandoning yourself in the middle of them. The first time Daniel Mercer saw a dead man, he was 32 years old. Not on television, not in a movie, not in a photograph. A real human being lying 10 feet away from him on a sidewalk in downtown Seattle, while hundreds of people continued walking to work. And in that moment, Daniel realized that almost everything he had been taught about life was a lie. Daniel had grown up in a world designed to protect him from discomfort. His father had built one of the most successful software companies in the Pacific Northwest. By the time Daniel was old enough to understand money, his family had more of it than anyone could reasonably spend. But wealth was not the strangest thing about his childhood. The strangest thing was how carefully reality had been edited for him. If someone in the family became seriously ill, Daniel was told they were taking some time away. When his grandfather began losing his memory, visits quietly stopped. When an employee died unexpectedly, his father never mentioned it at dinner. Problems were handled privately. Pain was removed from conversation. Failure was something that happened to people who had not planned well enough. His father believed he was giving his son a gift. "I worked hard so you would never have to struggle the way I did," he often told him. And Daniel believed him. He believed safety could be engineered. He believed enough money could create distance between a person and suffering. He believed successful people solved problems before those problems became painful. So Daniel became very good at control. He went to the right university. He made the right friends. He joined the family company. He lived in a building where someone else fixed anything that broke. His groceries appeared at his door. His car told him when something needed maintenance. His calendar warned him before appointments. His watch monitored his heart. His phone monitored his sleep. His financial advisor monitored his money. His doctor monitored his blood work. Every part of his life had a system. And still, Daniel could not explain why he sometimes woke at 3 a.m. with his heart pounding. Nothing was wrong. That was what made it terrifying. He had a good job. He had money. He had friends. He had a beautiful apartment. He had every reason to feel safe. Yet some nights he would lie awake thinking about everything that might disappear. What if the company failed? What if his father died? What if his own body betrayed him? What if he lost everything he had spent his life protecting? He responded the only way he knew how. He increased control, more exercise, more supplements, more productivity systems, more financial planning, more notifications, more insurance, more information. But the more he tried to make life predictable, the more unpredictable life seemed. Then came the morning that changed him. Daniel was walking to a meeting when he noticed several people gathered near the entrance of a building. At first, he assumed someone had fallen. Then he saw the body. A man was lying on the pavement. A paramedic was kneeling beside him. Another was preparing equipment. Daniel slowed down. He had never seen death arriving in real time. The man's face looked ordinary. That disturbed Daniel more than anything. This was not the dramatic death he had seen in movies. There was no soundtrack, no final speech, no meaning attached to it. There was simply a human being who had apparently been walking somewhere minutes earlier and was now completely still. Daniel stood there longer than he meant to. His meeting began without him. For once, he did not care. That afternoon, something inside him had changed. He began noticing things he had spent years overlooking. An elderly man, struggling to lift groceries into his car. A woman leaving a hospital with tears running down her face. A co-worker smiling during a meeting, even though Daniel knew her marriage was falling apart. His father rubbing his knee before standing up. The grey hairs around his mother's temples. The slight trembling in his own hands after too much coffee. It was as if someone had removed a filter from his life. And Daniel did not like what he saw. People got sick. Bodies aged, relationships ended, plans failed, parents grew older, careers changed. People you loved could leave before you were ready. No amount of achievement seemed powerful enough to negotiate with that truth. Daniel became angry, not at anyone in particular, at reality itself. One evening, he confronted his father. "You knew." His father looked confused. "Knew what?" "That none of this protects us." His father stared at him. Daniel continued. "The money, the planning, the houses, the doctors, the security. You knew none of it could actually stop something bad from happening." His father was silent for a long time. Then he said something Daniel had never heard him admit before. I was hoping it could. That answer stayed with Daniel. His father had not built a perfect life because he had conquered fear. He had built it because he was afraid. Daniel suddenly saw his childhood differently. The silence around illness, the avoidance of death, the obsession with achievement, the constant planning. It had never been freedom. It had been fear wearing expensive clothes. And Daniel realized he had inherited it. For several months, he searched for an answer the way he searched for everything else. Books, podcasts, experts, therapists, retreats. He approached peace like another project. If anxiety was the problem, there had to be a method that removed it. He tried waking before sunrise. He tried extreme diets. He tried cold showers. He tried intense workouts. He tried sitting in meditation until his legs went numb. He tried forcing himself not to think. He tried becoming the kind of person who was supposedly above fear. Nothing lasted. The harder he fought his mind, the louder it became. The harder he demanded calm, the more obvious his anxiety felt. Then, during a meditation class he nearly walked out of, an elderly Buddhist teacher said something that stopped him. You are suffering because you believe suffering should not exist. Daniel felt irritated. Of course, suffering should not exist. Was that not the entire point of becoming healthier, richer, stronger, wiser? The teacher continued. Pain comes into every human life, but we often create another pain by demanding that the first pain should not be happening. Daniel thought about the dead man on the sidewalk, his father's aging body, his mother's grey hair, his own fear at 3 a.m. For the first time, he did not try to solve any of it. He simply sat there. His chest was tight. He noticed it. His mind was afraid. He noticed that too. A thought appeared. What if I lose everything? Normally Daniel would have answered it with plans, numbers, strategies, reassurance. This time, he let the question remain unanswered. His breathing slowly changed. Not because he had defeated fear, not because he had discovered how to make life safe. Something much smaller had happened, and somehow, something much larger. He had stopped arguing with the fact that he was afraid. That evening, Daniel called his father. They did not discuss business. They did not discuss investments. They did not discuss the future. Daniel asked him a question he had never thought to ask. Are you scared of getting older? His father took a long breath. Every day, for the first time in Daniel's life, hearing his father admit fear did not make the world feel less safe. It made his father feel more human. And Daniel understood the beginning of something Buddhism had been teaching for more than 2,000 years. The first truth is not that life is hopeless. The first truth is that suffering exists. Bodies change. People leave. Plans collapse. Fear appears. Loss arrives. The Buddhist path does not begin by pretending these things will disappear. It begins when we stop building walls around ourselves and finally look at life as it is. Because peace does not come from creating a world where nothing painful can reach us. It begins when we no longer need reality to be painless before we are willing to live inside it. The day Michael Reed stopped rushing, he was already 12 minutes late, and for the first time in 20 years, he decided not to run. Michael was 46 years old and had built his entire adult life around one unquestioned belief. Faster was better. He answered emails while brushing his teeth. He took conference calls while driving. He ate lunch at his desk. He listened to podcasts at twice the normal speed because ordinary speed felt inefficient. He became irritated when someone ahead of him at a coffee shop took too long to order. He checked the estimated arrival time on his phone, even when there was nothing he could do to change it. At work, people admired him. Michael was the man who got things done. He worked for a major consulting firm in Chicago, managing projects that involved millions of dollars and people scattered across several time zones. His calendar was divided into blocks so tightly packed that 5 unscheduled minutes looked suspicious. His co-workers joked that if Michael ever stopped moving, his body might forget how to start again. He laughed with them, But lately, stopping had become frightening. Whenever the day finally became quiet, his body refused to follow. His shoulders remained tight. His jaw hurt. His heartbeat seemed too loud. At night, he would lie in bed exhausted, while his mind continued running meetings that had already ended and rehearsing conversations that might never happen. His wife, Rachel, had started saying the same thing to him. "You are always somewhere else." Michael hated hearing it. He was home, was he not? He was sitting at the kitchen table. He was standing beside her. He was watching their son play basketball. But Rachel was right. His body arrived everywhere before his mind did. His mind was always 15 minutes ahead. Then, his company sent him to New York for a 3-day meeting. On the second morning, everything went wrong. His alarm did not go off. A client sent an urgent message. His rideshare was delayed. Traffic barely moved. By the time Michael reached Midtown Manhattan, he was late for a meeting involving 3 senior executives. His chest tightened. He checked his watch, then his phone, then his watch again. 12 minutes late. Michael started moving faster. He passed one person, then another. His briefcase hit his leg with every step. His breathing shortened. His mind began constructing consequences. The executives would notice. His boss would ask questions. The client might interpret the delay as disrespect. Michael would have to apologize. He would look careless, unprepared, weak. He was halfway through this mental disaster when he almost collided with an older man. The man did not jump out of the way. He simply stopped. Michael stepped around him. "Sorry." The older man nodded. Michael continued. Then something strange made him look back. Everyone around the man seemed to be moving quickly. The older man was not. He walked at a pace so deliberate that Michael first assumed he was injured. But he was not limping. He was not confused. He was simply walking. One complete step, then another. No phone in his hand. No headphones. No visible urgency. Michael turned away. 3 seconds later, he looked back again. Something about the man irritated him. How could anyone move that slowly in Manhattan? Didn't he have somewhere to be? Michael continued toward his meeting, but at the next intersection, he saw the same man again. They had arrived at the light at almost the same time. Michael stared at him. The man noticed. "You seem disappointed," he said. Michael almost laughed. "I'm late." The older man nodded. "I noticed. I have an important meeting. Then you should probably go to it." Michael glanced at the signal. Still red. His foot was already angled forward, preparing to move. The older man stood beside him, without any sign that he wanted the light to change. Michael found this impossible to understand. "How are you so calm?" The man looked at him. "I'm standing at a red light." "I can see that." "Then what else should I be doing?" Michael had no answer. The light changed. Michael started forward immediately. The man walked beside him for several seconds before Michael accelerated. By the time Michael entered the office building, he had forgotten him, or thought he had. The meeting had already started. Michael apologized. One executive said, "No problem. We just got going. That was it. No disaster. No humiliation. No angry call from his boss. No damage to his career." For 12 minutes, Michael's body had behaved as though his life were in danger. Nothing had happened. That afternoon, the sentence returned to him. "I'm standing at a red light. What else should I be doing?" Michael began noticing how often he was physically doing one thing while mentally doing 3 others. Walking while answering messages, eating while reviewing documents, listening while preparing his response, waiting while resenting the wait. Even when nothing required speed, his body remained in a state of hurry. He had spent years blaming his stress on the amount of work he had. But now he wondered whether the problem was not only what he was doing, maybe it was the way he was doing everything. The next morning, Michael deliberately left his hotel 15 minutes early. It felt ridiculous. He walked toward the office without checking the time every 30 seconds. At the first intersection, he stopped. His hand automatically moved toward his phone. He left it in his pocket. He noticed his breathing. Shallow. He let one breath finish before taking another. The light changed. Michael walked, not dramatically, slowly, just without trying to defeat everyone around him. A strange discomfort appeared almost immediately. His mind told him to move faster. People were passing him. He felt as though he were doing something wrong. Then he realized something that disturbed him. No one was chasing him. There was no emergency. Nothing bad would happen if someone else reached the corner first. The urgency existed almost entirely inside him. So he continued walking. One step, then another. His shoulders lowered without being instructed. His hands stopped gripping the handle of his briefcase. For several minutes, Michael did nothing except go where he was going. And when he reached the office, he was early. That evening, he called Rachel. She asked how the trip was going. Michael started telling her about meetings. Then he stopped. Rachel? Yeah? When you say I'm always somewhere else, what do you mean? She was quiet. Then she answered carefully. It feels like you're always trying to finish the moment you're in. The words hit him harder than he expected. Finish breakfast. Finish the conversation. Finish the commute. Finish the workday. Finish dinner. Finish the week. Finish the year. Michael had spent decades rushing toward the next moment without ever asking what he expected to find there. He had treated his life like a hallway. Every moment was merely something to move through so he could reach another door. But there was always another door. That night, Michael did something almost embarrassingly small. He brushed his teeth without checking his phone. The next morning, he drank his coffee without opening his email. When he returned to Chicago, he stopped answering messages while walking from the train to his office. He began leaving 5 minutes earlier when possible. Sometimes he still rushed. Sometimes work really was urgent. Sometimes deadlines mattered. But he began asking himself a question whenever his body tightened and his mind shouted faster. Is there an actual emergency? Or have I simply forgotten how not to hurry? Months later, Michael understood why that stranger in New York had affected him so deeply. The man had not taught him how to move slowly. He had shown Michael that speed was not always something imposed upon him. Sometimes it was something he was choosing without realizing it. In Buddhist practice, calm does not require the world to become quiet first. The world may continue moving. Deadlines may remain. People may rush past. Responsibilities do not disappear. The practice is to stop allowing every movement around you to become a command inside you. When walking, walk. When waiting, wait. When breathing, breathe. You do not have to race through your life simply because everyone around you appears to be running. Sometimes the first step toward peace is not finding more time. It is finally stopping long enough to inhabit the time you already have. The first bite of food that made Laura Bennett cry was not expensive, rare, or prepared by a famous chef. It was a strawberry, and she was 41 years old when she realized she had forgotten how to taste one. Laura lived in Boston and worked as a senior marketing director for a national healthcare company. Her life looked organized from the outside. She had a good salary, a reliable car, a townhouse she was still paying for, a teenage daughter named Emma, a mother who called every Sunday, a calendar filled with meetings, appointments, reminders, deadlines, birthdays, bills, and things she was supposed to remember. Laura was not unhappy. At least, that was what she told herself. She was simply tired. Always tired. Every morning began with her phone. Before her feet touched the floor, she checked email, then the news, then messages, then the weather, then her work calendar. By the time she walked into the kitchen, her mind had already attended 3 meetings that had not happened yet. Breakfast was usually something she ate standing up. Lunch happened in front of a laptop. Dinner was often interrupted by notifications. Sometimes, Emma would be speaking to her from across the table, and Laura would suddenly realize she had not heard the last 30 seconds. What? Emma would stop. Never mind. No. I am listening. You are looking at your phone. I can do both. Emma would shrug. Laura hated that shrug. It made her feel accused. So she defended herself. I have a lot going on. Emma never argued. That somehow made Laura feel worse. One Thursday afternoon, Laura was eating a salad during a video conference. She had one screen open for the meeting, another for a presentation. Her phone was beside the keyboard. A message arrived from her boss. Another arrived from Emma. Laura glanced down. "Can you pick me up after practice?" She typed, "Yes." Then her boss asked her a question. Laura answered. Someone else began talking. Laura kept eating. A few minutes later, she looked down at the empty container. She could not remember eating the salad. Not one bite. She knew what had been in it because she had ordered the same thing dozens of times. Chicken, spinach, tomatoes, avocado. But she could not remember tasting any of it. The realization bothered her for about 10 seconds. Then another email arrived. She forgot about it. 2 days later, Laura visited her mother. Her mother had recently begun moving more slowly. Nothing dramatic had happened. She was simply 73 now. Laura noticed it but tried not to think about it. Thinking about aging made something tighten inside her. Her mother placed a bowl of strawberries on the table. "You used to eat these until your fingers turned red," she said. Laura smiled. "When I was 8, you would steal them before I washed them. I had no patience." Her mother laughed. "You had plenty of patience. You just loved strawberries." Laura reached into the bowl. Her phone vibrated. She looked at it. A work message. She answered while holding the strawberry in her other hand. Her mother watched her. "You know," she said, "you do not have to respond to everything the second it happens. It is work. I know. They expect me to be available." Her mother nodded. Then she asked a question. "When was the last time you ate something without doing anything else?" Laura looked up. "What do you mean?" "Just ate. I eat every day." "No. When was the last time you ate without reading, watching, typing, driving, planning, or talking?" Laura almost gave a sarcastic answer. Instead, she tried to remember. She could not. Her mother pointed toward the strawberry still in Laura's hand. "Eat that." Laura laughed. "Mum, just eat it. I know how to eat a strawberry." "Then prove it." Laura put down her phone, mostly to humor her. She lifted the strawberry toward her mouth. "Not yet," her mother said. Laura stared at her. "What now? Look at it. This is ridiculous." "Probably." Laura C. Hill. But she looked. For the first time in years, she actually looked at a strawberry before eating it. Not as food, not as calories, not as something to consume while doing something more important. That she noticed that the red was not uniform. Some parts were darker. Some were almost pink. The seeds sat in tiny indentations. The green leaves at the top folded over one another. Her mother said nothing. Laura brought it closer. She could smell it. She had eaten hundreds of strawberries in her life, but she could not remember the last time she had noticed their smell. Sweet, fresh, familiar. Something inside her softened. She took a bite. Her first instinct was to chew quickly and swallow. Instead, she slowed down. The strawberry was colder than she expected, then sweet, then slightly sour, then sweet again. The texture changed as she chewed. Juice touched her tongue, and suddenly, a memory appeared. Laura was 9 years old. Her father was still alive. She was sitting at the kitchen table with a bowl of strawberries between them. He was laughing because she had tried to fit an entire strawberry into her mouth. The memory arrived so clearly that Laura stopped chewing. Her father had been dead for 14 years. She rarely allowed herself to think about him for long. There was always something else to do, something else to manage, something else requiring attention. But now there he was, not as an idea, not as grief, as a living memory carried inside the taste of fruit. Laura swallowed. Her eyes filled with tears. Her mother noticed. "What happened?" Laura shook her head. "I remembered Dad." Her mother looked down. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Laura picked up another strawberry. This time, she did not need instructions. She looked at it, smelled it, took one bite, chewed slowly. Her phone vibrated again. She heard it. She did not reach for it. Nothing terrible happened. The message waited. The world continued. Laura ate the second strawberry, then a third. She began thinking about how many meals she had consumed without being present for them, how many cups of coffee she had swallowed without tasting, how many drives she had completed without remembering the road, how many times Emma had spoken while Laura's eyes were somewhere else, how many moments she had treated as obstacles between herself and the next task. She had spent years trying to create more time, productivity apps, calendar systems, faster computers, meal delivery, automatic payments, 2-day shipping, voice messages played faster. Everything in her life was designed to save minutes, and yet she never felt as though she had enough time. Now she understood something uncomfortable. Perhaps the problem was not that her life contained too few moments. Perhaps she was absent from the moments she already had. That evening, Laura drove Emma home from practice. Emma immediately reached for her phone. Laura almost did the same while they waited at a traffic light. Instead, she left it alone. How was practice? Fine. Laura waited. Emma looked at her. What? Nothing. You usually ask that, and then check your email. Laura felt the truth of it. I am trying something different. Emma smiled slightly. That sounds dangerous. Laura laughed. Tell me something that happened today. Emma began talking. Laura noticed the familiar impulse to plan dinner while listening. She noticed another thought about Monday's presentation, then another about laundry. She let each thought pass and returned to Emma's voice. Again and again, she did not listen perfectly. Her mind still wandered, but each time she noticed, she came back. A week later, Laura bought strawberries. She washed them, put several in a bowl, sat at the table. No television, no laptop, no phone. Emma walked into the kitchen. What are you doing? Eating strawberries. Emma looked suspicious. That is all? That is all. Emma sat across from her. Laura pushed the bowl toward her. For several minutes, neither of them did anything except eat. Laura's mind still produced thoughts. Tomorrow, work, money, her mother, her father, things unfinished, things uncertain. She did not fight them. She simply returned to the taste in her mouth. That was the practice. In Buddhism, mindfulness is sometimes misunderstood as forcing the mind to remain perfectly still. It is not. The mind wanders. You notice, and you return. You return to the breath. You return to the person speaking. You return to the food in your mouth. You return to the body sitting exactly where it is. Again and again. The present moment does not demand that you become someone different before entering it. It is already here. Laura had spent years believing her life would finally begin when everything was finished, when the inbox was empty, when Emma needed less, when work became easier, when she had more time. But sitting at the table with her daughter, holding one strawberry in her hand, she understood why the Buddhist path places so much attention on ordinary moments. Life was not waiting somewhere ahead of her. It had been arriving continuously. One conversation, one breath, one bite. And for the first time in a very long time, Laura was there when it arrived. The most terrifying moment of Rebecca Cole's life came when she realized she could not remember living through the day she had just finished. Rebecca was 44. She worked as an operations vice president for a technology company outside Austin, Texas. She had 2 children, a husband named David, a mortgage, 3 active group chats, 76 unread emails, and a calendar that seemed to reproduce while she slept. People described her as dependable, focused, strong, the kind of person who could handle pressure. Rebecca had spent years becoming that person. She woke before sunrise, checked overnight messages before getting out of bed, reviewed schedules while making coffee, answered emails while packing lunches, joined calls from the car, ate between meetings, worked through headaches, ignored hunger, ignored exhaustion, ignored the sensation in her chest that sometimes felt like a fist closing slowly around her heart. There was always a reason: a product launch, a budget deadline, a school event, A client crisis, a sick employee, a quarterly review. Something always needed her. And Rebecca liked being needed. Being needed meant being valuable. Being busy meant she was doing something important. Rest made her nervous. Silence made her reach for her phone. If she sat still for more than a minute, she remembered everything she had not finished. So she learned not to sit still. Then, one Tuesday evening, she left the office after a 14-hour day. She got into her car, closed the door, put her hands on the steering wheel, and froze. She could not remember driving to work that morning. She knew she had done it. Her car was there. Her purse was in the passenger seat. Her travel mug was empty in the cup holder. But the actual drive was gone. No memory of traffic. No memory of the highway. No memory of the song playing. Nothing. She tried to remember lunch. There was an empty container in her office trash can. She could not remember eating. She tried to remember a conversation with her son before school. She knew they had spoken, but she could not remember his face. That frightened her more than anything. Rebecca sat completely still. Her phone lit up. She did not touch it. Another notification appeared, then another. She stared at the screen until it went dark, and suddenly she began to cry, not quietly, not gracefully. She bent forward over the steering wheel and cried with the exhaustion of someone who had been holding herself together for years without realizing how much strength it required. She was not crying because one terrible thing had happened. She was crying because nothing had happened. That was the problem. Her entire life had become a sequence of completed tasks that she barely experienced. She was succeeding at a life she was almost never present for. When she finally drove home, David was in the kitchen. He looked at her and immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? Rebecca put her purse down. I do not remember today. He waited. I mean it. I cannot remember most of it. David did not tell her she was overreacting. He did not offer a solution. He simply pulled out a chair. Sit down. Rebecca almost said she could not. There were dishes. The children needed things. She had messages to answer. Instead, she sat. David put a glass of water in front of her. For once, she drank it without doing anything else. The next morning, Rebecca woke at 5:45. Her hand reached automatically toward her phone. She stopped. The phone was 3 inches from her fingers. She could feel the urge to check it. Her mind began producing reasons. Something might have happened overnight. A client might need her. There might be an emergency. She picked it up. Then she remembered the parking garage. She put it back down. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed. She had no meditation practice, no spiritual routine, no idea what she was supposed to do. So she did nothing for 60 seconds. At first, 1 minute felt enormous. Her mind became louder. Get up, check the phone, make coffee. You are wasting time. You have too much to do. Rebecca remained seated. She noticed her shoulders were already tense. She noticed her jaw was clenched. She noticed she was holding her breath. So she exhaled, then inhaled, then exhaled again. Nothing dramatic happened. She did not become calm. Her thoughts did not disappear. But she noticed something she had not noticed in years. She was there. The next day, she did it again. 1 minute. The third day, she almost skipped it. The fourth day, she forgot. On the fifth day, she remembered while sitting in her car before entering the office. So she stayed there for 1 minute, hands resting in her lap. No email, no planning, no rehearsing conversations, just breathing. After several days, Rebecca began adding these pauses to transitions. Before opening her laptop, before entering a meeting, before walking through the front door at night, before answering when she felt angry, before getting into bed. The pauses were tiny. 5 seconds sometimes, 30 seconds, 1 minute. They looked insignificant, but they began exposing how much of Rebecca's stress came from momentum. She noticed she often rushed when nothing required speed. She noticed how many times she interrupted her children because her mind was already moving toward the next task. She noticed how quickly she reached for her phone whenever discomfort appeared. She noticed that half the urgency in her life was real. The other half was habit. One evening, Rebecca arrived home while still thinking about a difficult conversation with her chief executive officer. She parked in the driveway. Her hand moved toward the door. Then she stopped. 1 minute. She breathed. Her mind replayed the conversation. She noticed it. Her chest tightened. She noticed that too. She did not try to fix the feeling. She simply let the workday exist inside her without carrying it immediately into the house. Then she opened the door. Her son came running toward her. "Mom, you have to see what I made." Normally, Rebecca would have said, "Give me 1 minute." Then 1 minute would become 20. This time she put down her bag. "Show me." He pulled her toward the table. Rebecca looked, really looked. It was a model bridge made from wooden sticks and glue. Some pieces were crooked. One side leaned. Her son was glowing. Rebecca listened while he explained how it worked. Her phone vibrated inside her purse. She heard it. She left it there. That night, after the children were asleep, David asked, "What changed?" Rebecca thought about it. "I stopped trying to arrive at the next thing before I finished being in this one." David smiled. "That sounds like something you should write down." Rebecca did. Weeks later, 1 minute had not solved her life. Her job remained demanding. Her children still needed rides. Deadlines still appeared. She still lost patience. She still woke, anxious some mornings. But something fundamental had shifted. She was no longer treating calm as a reward she would receive after everything was finished. She had begun placing small moments of stillness inside unfinished life. This is close to what Buddhist practice teaches through mindfulness. Peace does not require the complete removal of responsibility. It begins with awareness. A pause between one moment and the next. A breath before reaction. A willingness to notice the body before the mind races forward. In Buddhism, suffering often grows when we live automatically, pulled by craving, fear, urgency, and habit, without seeing them clearly. The sacred pause interrupts that chain. It does not erase difficulty. It gives us a place from which to meet difficulty consciously. Rebecca had spent years believing she needed a different life before she could feel present. What she needed was much smaller. A few seconds in which she stopped abandoning the life already happening, and slowly, one pause at a time, she began returning to it. Ethan Walker ruined an entire weekend over something that lasted less than 90 seconds. The strange part was that the other person involved had forgotten about it before lunch. Ethan was 38 and worked as a project manager for a construction company in Denver, Colorado. He was good at remembering details, deadlines, budgets, promises, mistakes, especially mistakes. If someone said something disrespectful to him, Ethan remembered the exact words. If a coworker embarrassed him during a meeting, he replayed the moment while driving home. If his wife used the wrong tone during an argument, he could reconstruct the conversation days later with the precision of a court transcript. He called it having a good memory. His wife, Megan, called it never letting anything die. One Friday morning, Ethan was leading a meeting about a hospital renovation that had already fallen behind schedule. Everyone was tense. The room was filled with people who wanted answers Ethan did not yet have. Halfway through the meeting, a senior contractor named Paul interrupted him. "That is not what we agreed to." Ethan stopped. "It is exactly what we agreed to." Paul shook his head. "No. You changed the schedule after the last review. I sent the revised timeline to everyone. You sent a document. That does not mean anyone agreed to it." Several people looked down at the table. Ethan felt heat rising into his face. Paul continued, "This is what happens when someone tries to manage everything from spreadsheets instead of understanding what is actually happening on site." The room became silent. Ethan heard only one sentence. "Someone tries to manage everything from spreadsheets." He stared at Paul. "What exactly are you implying?" "I am not implying anything. You just questioned my competence in front of the entire team." Paul sighed. "I questioned the schedule." "No. You made it personal." The meeting continued. Technically, Ethan answered questions, took notes, assigned tasks, but inside his mind, the meeting had stopped at that sentence. Someone tries to manage everything from spreadsheets. At noon, Paul walked past Ethan's desk. Hey, Ethan barely looked up. Paul stopped. About earlier, I came in too hot. This project has everybody frustrated. I should not have said it that way. Ethan nodded. Fine, I mean it. Okay. Paul stood there another second, then left. The matter was over, except Ethan took it home. While driving, he replayed Paul's words. By the time he reached his house, he had constructed 3 different responses he wished he had given. He imagined stopping the meeting, calling Paul out publicly, explaining every mistake Paul's team had made, showing everyone exactly who was incompetent. Megan met him in the kitchen. How was your day? Paul was an ass. She waited. Ethan told her the story. Every detail, every word. What happened after? He apologized. Megan looked confused. He apologized? Yeah. Then what are you still angry about? Ethan stared at her. Because he said it. Megan knew better than to continue. Saturday morning, Ethan woke thinking about Paul. He was supposed to take his 11-year-old daughter, Chloe, to breakfast. She told him a story about a friend at school. Ethan nodded, but he was mentally back inside the conference room. At one point, Chloe stopped talking. Dad, what? You are doing that thing. What thing? Where you look at me but you are not listening. Ethan forced a smile. Sorry. Tell me again. She did. He lost the thread a second time. That afternoon, Ethan went hiking with his older brother, Noah. Noah had spent several years studying meditation after recovering from alcohol addiction. Ethan teased him about it. He called him the family monk. Noah never seemed offended. They had been walking for nearly an hour when Ethan mentioned Paul. Then he told the entire story. Noah listened. Ethan finished with, "Can you believe that?" Noah asked. "What did he do afterward?" He apologized. "Did it sound sincere?" "I guess." "Did he repeat the insult?" "No." "Did he threaten you?" "No." "Did anything else happen?" Ethan became irritated. "That is not the point." Noah nodded. "What is the point?" "The point is that he disrespected me. Yesterday." "Yes." "And he apologized yesterday." "Yes." Noah stopped walking. Ethan turned around. "What?" Noah removed a large rock from beside the trail. He handed it to Ethan. "Hold this." Ethan frowned. "Why?" "Just hold it." The rock weighed perhaps 15 pounds. Ethan held it against his chest. Noah resumed walking. Ethan followed. After several minutes, his arms began to ache. "How long am I carrying this thing?" Noah looked back. "I do not know. You are the one carrying it." Ethan rolled his eyes. Very spiritual. They continued. The rock became heavier. Ethan shifted it from one arm to the other. Finally, he stopped. "This is stupid." He placed the rock on the ground. Noah looked at it. "Interesting." "What?" Nothing happened to the rock. Ethan stared at him. Noah continued. "It did not apologize. It did not change. It did not become lighter. You simply stopped carrying it." Ethan immediately knew where this was going. "Do not turn this into one of your meditation lessons." "I am not." "You are." Noah smiled. "Paul insulted you for 90 seconds. How many hours have you insulted yourself with the memory?" Ethan said nothing. Noah continued walking. After a moment, Ethan followed. The question stayed with him. How many hours? Friday afternoon, Friday night, Saturday morning, breakfast with Chloe, the drive, the hike. Paul had hurt him once. Ethan had been repeating the injury ever since. "But if I let it go," Ethan said, "doesn't that mean what he did was okay?" Noah shook his head. "Putting down a rock does not mean the rock was light." Ethan looked at him. "It means you decided you were done carrying it." For the rest of the hike, Ethan said very little. That evening, Chloe asked him to help build a model for a school project. They sat at the dining table. Halfway through, Paul's face appeared in Ethan's mind. Someone tries to manage everything from spreadsheets. His chest tightened. His mind began preparing another imaginary argument. Then Ethan remembered the rock. He looked at Chloe. She was waiting for him to hold 2 pieces of cardboard together while she taped them. Ethan noticed something almost painful. Paul was not in the room. The conference table was not in the room. Friday morning was not happening. Only Chloe was happening. Only this table. Only his hands holding cardboard. Only his daughter asking him to stay still. Ethan breathed. The thought about Paul remained for a few seconds. He did not argue with it. He did not tell himself he should not be angry. He simply let the memory be a memory. Then he returned to his daughter. On Monday morning, Ethan saw Paul near the elevator. For one instant, the old anger rose again. Paul nodded. Morning. Ethan nodded back. Morning. Nothing more was required. That was when Ethan understood a teaching repeated for centuries in Buddhist tradition. 2 monks once encountered a woman who needed help crossing a river. One monk carried her across, placed her safely on the other side, and continued walking. Hours later, the younger monk was still angry that his companion had touched her. Finally, the older monk said, "I put her down at the river. Why are you still carrying her?" Buddhism does not ask us to pretend harm never happened. It does not ask us to abandon boundaries or tolerate cruelty. It asks us to notice when an event has ended in reality but continues happening inside the mind. Resentment often feels like justice. Sometimes it is only repetition. The insult happened once. The betrayal happened once. The embarrassing moment happened once. Then the mind picks it up and carries it through breakfast, through conversations, through weekends, through years. Letting go does not rewrite the past. It does not declare the other person innocent. It simply refuses to sacrifice another present moment to something that is no longer occurring. Ethan had believed remembering the injury protected his dignity. What he slowly learned was harder and far more freeing. Sometimes the strongest thing a person can do is recognize when the river is already behind him and put the weight down. The most important thing Amanda Lewis ever discovered about anxiety happened when she stopped trying to make it disappear. For nearly 15 years, Amanda had been fighting her own mind. She was 39, lived in Philadelphia, and worked as a financial analyst for a national insurance company. On paper, her life looked stable. She had a steady job, a small house, a close relationship with her younger sister, friends she had known since college. Nothing about her life seemed dangerous, but Amanda rarely felt safe. Her mind was always preparing for something. If her manager scheduled a meeting without explaining why, Amanda assumed she was about to be fired. If her sister did not answer a text for 2 hours, Amanda imagined a car accident. If she felt a strange sensation in her chest, she wondered whether something was wrong with her heart. If a friend became quiet during dinner, Amanda assumed she had said something offensive. Every ordinary uncertainty became an opening, and her mind filled the opening with disaster. Amanda knew most of her fears were exaggerated. That knowledge did not help. She would tell herself to calm down, then become frustrated because she could not calm down. She would remind herself that nothing bad had happened. Then another voice would answer, "Not yet." She read books about anxiety, downloaded meditation applications, tried breathing exercises, tried running, tried avoiding caffeine, tried keeping herself busy, tried forcing herself to think positively. Some things helped for a while. Nothing gave her the one thing she wanted, a silent mind. Amanda believed peace meant reaching a point where the anxious voice never returned. So every time it returned, she felt defeated. One Sunday evening, her sister called. "You sound exhausted." "I am fine. You always say that." "Amanda Seahill, I have a presentation tomorrow. You have given 100 presentations. That does not mean this one will go well. Do you think something specific is wrong?" Amanda paused. "No." "Then what are you afraid of?" Amanda began listing possibilities. She could forget what to say. The senior vice president could ask a question she could not answer. Her numbers could be challenged. She might look nervous. Her voice might shake. People might realize she was not as competent as they thought. Her sister listened, then said, "You know none of that has happened yet." Amanda became irritated. "I know. I am not saying your fear is fake. It feels real. I know. I am saying the future you are afraid of is happening in your head tonight." Amanda did not want to hear it. She ended the call early. That night, she slept badly. The next morning, she gave the presentation. Her voice shook during the first minute. Then it steadied. The senior vice president asked 2 difficult questions. Amanda answered one. On the other, she said, "I do not have that number in front of me, but I can confirm it this afternoon." Nobody laughed. Nobody exposed her as a fraud. Nobody fired her. The meeting ended. People returned to work. Amanda should have felt relieved. Instead, her mind found another problem. "You looked nervous. They noticed. You should have answered that question. Maybe they are talking about you now." By lunch, Amanda was exhausted again. That was when she realized something frightening. Her anxiety did not need bad events. It could survive good outcomes. If the presentation went badly, she would worry because it had gone badly. If it went well, she would worry about what she could have done better. There was no victory condition. Her mind could always create another reason to remain afraid. A week later, Amanda attended a mindfulness workshop recommended by a coworker. She almost left during the first 20 minutes. The teacher asked everyone to sit quietly and notice what was happening inside them. Amanda hated it. Within seconds, her mind exploded. "This is pointless. You should be working. You are wasting Saturday. Your back hurts. You are doing this wrong. Everyone else is calmer than you. You cannot even meditate correctly." Then came the familiar thought, "Something is wrong with you." Amanda opened her eyes. The teacher noticed, "If you are uncomfortable, that is allowed." Amanda almost laughed. Allowed? She had spent most of her adult life believing uncomfortable feelings were emergencies. The teacher continued, "Do not try to empty your mind. Just notice what the mind is doing." Amanda closed her eyes again. A thought appeared. "I cannot do this." She silently answered, thinking. Another appeared. "This is never going to work." Judging. Then, what if I feel this anxious forever? Worrying. Amanda felt ridiculous, but she continued. Thinking, planning, remembering, worrying, judging. For several minutes, nothing disappeared. Then something unexpected happened. Amanda noticed the sentence, "I am anxious." She had said those words thousands of times, but now she heard them differently. "I am anxious." Then another thought appeared. "I notice anxiety." Amanda opened her eyes. The difference seemed tiny, but it did not feel tiny. If she could notice anxiety, then anxiety was something being noticed. If she could hear the worried voice, then she was not only the voice, there was also the part of her that could listen. Amanda stayed after the workshop. "I think I had a strange experience." The teacher smiled. "Most useful experiences sound strange at first," Amanda explained. "I always thought anxiety was me, or at least part of who I am. But for a second, it felt like I was watching it." The teacher nodded. "That is awareness. So how do I stay there?" "You will not." Amanda looked disappointed. The teacher continued. "You will get pulled back into thought. Then you will notice. Then you return. Then you get pulled away again. The practice is not never getting lost. The practice is recognizing that you are lost." Amanda thought about that for days. She had always treated anxiety like an enemy invading her house. Now she experimented with treating it like a visitor. On Tuesday morning, her manager sent a message. "Can you come by my office at 10? Amanda's stomach tightened instantly. The story began. "Something is wrong. You made a mistake. This is about layoffs." She felt the familiar urge to open old emails and search for evidence. Instead, she paused, worrying. She whispered. The thoughts continued. "You should prepare. You need to know what this is." Planning. Then another thought. "You are going to lose your job." Amanda asked herself something she had learned to ask. Is that a fact? No. The fact was simple. Her manager wanted to see her at 10. Everything else was a prediction. Her body was still anxious. She did not pretend otherwise. She noticed the tightness in her stomach, the warmth in her face, the shallow breathing. For once, she did not demand that these sensations leave before she continued working. At 10, she entered her manager's office. He asked her to lead a new project. That was all. Amanda returned to her desk and almost laughed. Her mind had spent 2 hours living through a disaster that had never existed. But instead of criticizing herself, she noticed something new. The anxious thoughts had appeared. She had felt them, and she had not obeyed every one. That became her practice. When fear appeared, Amanda stopped saying, "I am broken." She began saying, "Fear is here." When her mind predicted catastrophe, she said, "My mind is telling a story." When she felt tension, she let the sensation exist without immediately building a future around it. Some days she could do this easily. Other days anxiety still pulled her under. But even on difficult days, she began remembering something she had never known before. A wave could be powerful without becoming the entire ocean. In Buddhist practice, thoughts and emotions are not enemies that must be destroyed. They arise, they change, they pass. Awareness allows us to see them without becoming completely fused with them. The frightened thought is real as a thought. The anxious sensation is real as a sensation. But neither has to become an identity. Amanda had spent years asking, "How do I stop feeling anxious?" Slowly, she began asking a different question. Can I notice anxiety without giving it everything I am? That question did not silence her mind. It gave her something far more valuable: space. And inside that space, for the first time, Amanda discovered that fear could speak without becoming her voice. For 3 years, Natalie Brooks treated her body like a malfunctioning machine. Then one afternoon, it answered back. Natalie was 42 and worked as a human resources director for a large hospital system in Phoenix, Arizona. Her job required calm. People came to her angry, afraid, burned out, ready to quit. Managers called when teams were falling apart. Employees called when they felt ignored. Executives called when they wanted difficult problems handled quietly. Natalie had become very good at absorbing tension without showing it. She was known for keeping her voice steady. She never raised it, never cried at work, never slammed doors, never lost control. People called her strong. Natalie believed them. Then the pain started. At first, it was a tightness in her lower back. Then it moved into her right hip. Some mornings it was dull. Other days it felt like a deep knot she could not stretch away. She went to a physician. Nothing serious appeared on the scans. She tried physical therapy. She changed her desk chair, bought a standing desk, stopped wearing heels, started taking walks. She stretched every morning. For a while, things improved. Then the pain returned. Natalie hated not having an explanation. If there was a problem, she wanted a cause. If there was a cause, she wanted a solution. That was how she lived. Find the issue, make a plan, fix it. But her body refused to cooperate. One evening, her younger sister, Claire, called. "You sound exhausted." "I am always exhausted. That is not normal. It is adulthood." Claire laughed. "No, that is your favorite excuse." Natalie changed the subject. Claire did not let her. "How is your hip?" "Still annoying. Have you tried slowing down?" Natalie almost hung up. "Please do not turn this into a wellness lecture. I am serious. I have a real physical problem." "I did not say you did not." "Then what are you saying?" Claire paused. "When was the last time you actually felt anything without immediately trying to solve it?" Natalie frowned. "I feel things." "Name." "1. I'm irritated right now." "That is not what I mean." Natalie knew exactly what she meant. She just did not want to answer. Their mother had died 4 years earlier. Natalie had handled everything: the hospital paperwork, the insurance calls, The funeral home, the obituary, the relatives, the house, the bank accounts. Claire had fallen apart. Natalie had held everything together. At the funeral, people kept telling her how strong she was. She thanked them, then went home and answered work email. 3 days later, she returned to the office. She told herself routine would help. It did. Routine gave her somewhere to put all the feelings she did not know what to do with. Then came the divorce. 2 years after her mother's death, Natalie's husband told her he wanted to leave. He said they had become roommates. He said she was physically present but emotionally unreachable. Natalie did not beg. She did not scream. She hired a lawyer, made a spreadsheet, divided the accounts, found an apartment, changed insurance plans. People were impressed by how well she handled it. Again, she was strong. Again, she kept moving. The pain in her hip appeared 6 months later. Natalie never connected the two. She did not believe in connecting everything. A hip was a hip. A divorce was a divorce. Grief was grief. Work was work. Everything belonged in its own category. Then Claire convinced her to attend a beginner yoga class. Natalie agreed only because her physical therapist had suggested gentle mobility work. She arrived with one goal: fix the hip. The instructor began with simple movements. Natalie followed carefully. She wanted to do everything correctly. When the teacher said to notice the breath, Natalie tried to breathe correctly. When she said to soften the shoulders, Natalie deliberately lowered them. Even relaxation became another task. Halfway through the class, they moved into a stretch that placed pressure around Natalie's hips. Nothing dramatic happened at first. Then the teacher said, "If you notice tension, do not force it away. Let yourself feel what is already there." Natalie almost rolled her eyes. She had heard language like this before. Then her breathing changed. Her chest tightened. For no obvious reason, an image of her mother appeared in her mind. Not the hospital, not the funeral. Her mother sitting at Natalie's kitchen table years earlier, laughing so hard she could barely speak. Natalie opened her eyes. The memory disappeared. She tried to focus on the stretch. Then another memory came. Her husband standing in their bedroom saying, "I do not know how to reach you anymore." Natalie felt heat move into her face. She wanted to get up. The teacher's voice continued, "You do not have to understand what you are feeling." That sentence broke something open. Natalie began to cry. She tried to stop. That made it worse. The tears came faster. Her breathing became uneven. Embarrassment arrived immediately. "This is ridiculous. Everyone can see you. Get control of yourself." But for once, control did not work. Natalie sat up. The instructor quietly came closer. "Do you need anything?" Natalie wiped her face. "I do not know why I am crying." The instructor nodded. "You do not have to know yet." That answer bothered her and relieved her. Natalie stayed. She did not finish every pose. She did not try to. For the rest of the class, she noticed sensations she had ignored for years. Her jaw was tight. Her shoulders were tired. Her stomach felt hard. Her hands kept curling into fists. She realized she had spent years treating these signals like inconveniences. She took pain medicine for headaches, coffee for fatigue, work for grief, busyness for loneliness, silence for anger. She had been listening to everyone except herself. After class, Natalie sat in her car. Normally, she would have checked her phone immediately. Instead, she placed both hands on her thighs. Her hips still hurt, but something about the pain felt different. She did not ask it to disappear. She asked herself a question: what have I not allowed myself to feel? Her mind answered quickly: nothing. Then another answer came: everything. Natalie cried again. This time she did not stop herself. Over the next several months, she continued medical care. She continued physical therapy. She did not pretend every physical symptom was emotional, but she added something new: attention. When her shoulders tightened after a difficult meeting, she noticed. When her jaw clenched during a conversation with her former husband, she noticed. When exhaustion arrived, she stopped calling herself lazy. When sadness came, She no longer automatically opened her laptop. Some evenings, she sat for 5 minutes without trying to accomplish anything. At first, those minutes were uncomfortable. Memories appeared, anger appeared, grief appeared, relief appeared. Sometimes nothing appeared. Natalie learned not to demand a revelation every time she became still. She simply practiced listening. One night, Claire called. "How is the hip?" Natalie thought before answering. "Better." "Yoga fixed it?" "No. Physical therapy." "Partly." Claire waited. Natalie continued. "I think I stopped treating my body like it was betraying me." "What do you mean?" "I kept asking why it was making my life harder." She took a breath. "I never asked what it needed." Months later, Natalie found an old voicemail from her mother. She almost deleted it. Instead, she listened. Her mother's voice filled the room. For a moment, grief rose so sharply that Natalie wanted to turn it off. She felt the familiar urge to escape. Then she placed one hand on her chest. She let the pain be there. She let love be there too. Neither needed to be solved. In Buddhist practice, the body is not an obstacle to awareness. It is one of the first places awareness can begin. Before the mind creates explanations, the body often speaks through breath, tension, fatigue, heat, pressure, restlessness, and pain. The practice is not to invent a spiritual meaning for every symptom. It is to stop abandoning the body whenever its message is inconvenient. Mindfulness asks us to notice sensation without immediately clinging to what feels pleasant or fighting what feels unpleasant. Just this: tightness, warmth, a tear, a breath, a heartbeat, a body trying to be heard. Natalie had spent most of her life believing strength meant feeling less. The Buddhist path slowly showed her something different. Strength could mean remaining present enough to feel what was already there, not drowning in it, not becoming it, not fixing it before it had even been heard, just listening. And for the first time in years, Natalie stopped asking her body to be quiet. She finally gave it permission to speak. David Miller had walked thousands of miles in his life. He had walked through airports, office buildings, grocery stores, hotel lobbies, parking garages, hospitals, and college campuses. But at 50 years old, he realized he had almost never felt a single step. David lived in Northern Virginia and worked as a corporate strategist for a defense contractor near Washington, D.C. He was paid to think, to anticipate problems, to analyze risks, to prepare for what might happen next. His mind was valuable because it rarely stopped moving. At work, that made him successful. At home, it made him almost impossible to reach. His wife, Susan, would sometimes ask him a question and wait several seconds before realizing he had not heard her. His adult son had once told him, "Dad, even when you are sitting down, you somehow look like you are late." David laughed. He thought it was funny. It was not. His body had spent years following his mind around like an exhausted employee. When David was hungry, he delayed eating. When he was tired, he drank coffee. When his back hurt, he changed chairs. When his shoulders tightened, he ignored them. He exercised because a doctor told him it was good for his heart. But even during exercise, his mind was somewhere else. He answered messages on the treadmill, reviewed presentations while cycling, planned meetings while walking. The body was simply transportation for the brain. Then one winter, David's younger brother died suddenly from a heart attack. His brother was 54, healthy enough. Everyone had thought, busy, working, planning a family trip, sending messages the night before, then gone. David handled the loss the way he handled everything. He organized, called relatives, helped with paperwork, reviewed insurance documents, made travel arrangements, spoke at the funeral, returned to work 5 days later. People told him he was strong. David accepted the compliment, but something changed afterward. He began having moments in which the world felt strangely unreal. He would be sitting in a meeting and suddenly wonder why everyone was talking so quickly. He would look at his own hands and feel disconnected from them. At night, he would lie in bed, thinking about his brother, not memories. Questions. How could someone exist on Tuesday and not exist on Wednesday? How many mornings had his brother rushed through assuming there would be another? How many conversations had David himself half listened to because he was already thinking about the next thing? He became afraid of slowing down, because when he slowed down, these questions appeared. So he worked more. Susan noticed. You do not have to outrun this. I am not outrunning anything. You are never home. I am home right now. Your body is. David hated that answer. Several months later, Susan gave him a birthday gift he did not want. A 3-day silent mindfulness retreat. David stared at the envelope. You cannot be serious. I am. 3 days without talking. That is the idea. What would I do for 3 days? Susan smiled sadly. Maybe find out. David nearly refused, but somewhere beneath his irritation was exhaustion. He went. The first day was miserable. No laptop, no news, no business calls, no conversation. David had never realized how noisy his mind was until the outside world became quiet. He planned imaginary meetings, replayed old arguments, calculated how many hours remained, judged the other participants, judged himself for judging them. During seated meditation, his knees hurt. During meals, he ate too quickly. During breaks, he instinctively reached for a phone that had been locked away. By the second day, David was convinced the retreat was useless. Then came walking meditation. The teacher gave one instruction: feel your feet. David waited for more. There was no more. He almost laughed. Feel your feet? He had flown across the country, rearranged his schedule, surrendered his phone, and spent 2 days in silence. For this, the teacher continued. Do not think about walking. Feel walking. David looked down. He lifted his right foot, placed it forward, then his left. At first, he felt almost nothing. His mind immediately began talking. This is stupid. You know how to walk. You have been walking your entire life. Then he remembered the instruction. Feel your feet. David slowed down. His right heel touched the floor, then the rest of the foot. His weight moved forward. His toes pressed down. His left heel lifted. For several seconds, David's mind became quiet. Not empty, just quiet enough for sensation to become noticeable. Heel, pressure, shift, lift, step. He took another, then another. Something about the simplicity unsettled him. There was no goal, no destination, no performance. He was not walking to arrive somewhere. He was simply walking. A memory surfaced. His brother was 8 years old. David was 4. They were crossing a street together. His brother held his hand. Stay with me, he had said. David had forgotten the memory for decades. Now it appeared with impossible clarity. Stay with me. David stopped. His chest tightened. He tried to continue walking. 1 step, then another. The tears came without warning. He turned away, embarrassed, but there was nowhere to hide from silence. No email to answer, no meeting to enter, no task to complete. He cried quietly while standing on 2 feet he had ignored for most of his life. The teacher approached. David wiped his face. I do not know what is happening. The teacher said, You are feeling what is happening. David almost asked for an explanation. He did not. He looked down. His feet were still there, supporting him, holding his weight. He felt the floor beneath them. For the first time since his brother died, David was not trying to understand death. He was feeling life, not as an idea, as pressure beneath his soles, breath moving through his chest, weight shifting from one leg to the other. The simple fact that he was here. That evening, David walked again, slowly. He noticed how often his mind escaped. The future, the past, work, his brother, Susan. Every time it wandered, he returned to his feet. Not perfectly, just repeatedly. On the final day, David called Susan. She answered immediately. How was it? David paused. He had prepared several jokes, None came. I think I have been missing my own life. Susan was quiet. David continued. I keep thinking about where I am going. His voice broke slightly. I never noticed that I am already somewhere. When he returned home, David did not become a different person overnight. He still worked hard, still planned, still worried, still forgot himself. But he began practicing something almost invisible. When walking from his car to the office, he sometimes felt his feet. When standing in line, he noticed his weight. When Susan spoke, he tried to keep part of his attention in his body instead of disappearing into thought. Before important meetings, he stopped for one breath and felt the ground. Months later, his son visited. They took a walk together. Halfway through, David noticed the old habit returning. His mind was planning Monday. He stopped internally. Feet, step, breath, then his son's voice. David came back. In Buddhism, mindfulness of the body is not about worshipping the body or making it perfect. It is a way of returning from abstraction to reality. The mind can live yesterday again and again. It can suffer tomorrow 1,000 times before tomorrow arrives. The body cannot. The body is always here. This breath, this heartbeat, this pressure beneath the feet, this one step. David had spent decades believing his mind was the center of his life. Walking slowly taught him something far simpler. Sometimes peace begins when thought stops leading every moment. Sometimes the way home is not hidden in a complicated answer. Sometimes it is directly beneath you, and all you have to do is feel where your feet already are. The worst thing that happened to Henry Collins on a Monday morning saved his son's life by Friday. Henry was 67 and had spent nearly 4 decades running a small horse farm outside Lexington, Kentucky. He was not wealthy. He was not poor. He had enough land to work, enough animals to care for, enough money to worry about losing, enough years behind him to know that life rarely stayed the way anyone expected. His son, Luke, was 26 and had recently moved back home after losing his job. Luke hated being back. Every morning seemed to remind him that his life had not gone according to plan. His friends were getting promoted, buying houses, getting married, moving to bigger cities. Luke was feeding horses before sunrise and sleeping in the bedroom he had left after high school. He felt like a failure. Henry never called him one. That almost made Luke more frustrated. On Monday morning, their most valuable horse disappeared. A section of fencing had broken during the night. By the time Henry noticed, the horse was gone. Luke panicked. That horse is worth more than my truck. Henry nodded. We should start looking. They searched for hours. Nothing. A neighbor heard what had happened and drove over. That is terrible luck. Henry wiped his hands on his jeans. Maybe. The neighbor frowned. Maybe? You just lost your best horse. I know. That is bad luck. Henry looked at him. Maybe. Luke was embarrassed. After the neighbor left, he said, Why do you always do that? Do what? Act like nothing matters. Henry looked at his son carefully. I did not say it does not matter. You said maybe. I said I do not know what it means yet. Luke shook his head. A missing horse means we lost a horse. That part is true, and that is bad. Henry paused. That part is a judgment. Luke walked away. He did not have patience for philosophy. He had enough problems already. That night, Luke searched online for jobs. Every rejection email felt like proof that his life was moving backward. The missing horse became another piece of evidence. Nothing is working. Everything is getting worse. I should not be here. I should be further ahead. I should have figured this out by now. By midnight, Luke had turned one missing horse into a verdict on his entire life. Henry was still awake when Luke came into the kitchen. You ever feel like everything is going wrong at once? Henry looked at him. Yes. What did you do? Usually, I made it worse by deciding I knew what everything meant. Luke Sihil, that makes no sense. It did not make sense to me either when I was your age. Tuesday morning, they heard hoofbeats near the back field. The missing horse had returned, but it was not alone. 3 wild horses had followed it through the broken section of fence. Luke stared. "You have got to be kidding me." Henry opened the gate carefully. Within an hour, all 4 horses were safely contained. The same neighbor returned. He could barely contain his excitement. "Henry, this is incredible. You lost 1 horse and got 4 back. That is some unbelievable good luck." Henry smiled. "Maybe." The neighbor laughed. "There you go again." Luke did not laugh. This time he was annoyed for a different reason. "Dad, can you just admit this is good?" Henry looked at the horses. "It looks good." "Then say it." "I am saying I am grateful." "That is not the same thing." "No." Luke threw up his hands. "You are impossible." Later that day, Luke became fascinated with one of the new horses. It was strong, fast, and difficult to control. Henry warned him, "Give it time. I know what I am doing. I know you know horses. Then trust me." Henry did not argue. Luke mounted the horse. For less than a minute, everything seemed fine. Then the horse reacted violently. Luke was thrown. He hit the ground hard. His leg broke in 2 places. At the emergency room, Luke was furious. Not just from pain, from the feeling that life had tricked him. "Yesterday I thought things were finally turning around." Henry sat beside him. "I know. Then this happens. I know. This is bad." Henry did not answer immediately. Luke stared at him. "Do not say maybe." Henry almost smiled. Luke pointed at his leg. "This is objectively bad. It hurts. It is broken. Yes, I cannot work. For a while, I cannot drive. Not right now. How is any of that not bad?" Henry leaned back. "I am not asking you to enjoy it." "Then what are you saying?" "I am saying pain is already enough. You do not have to turn it into a prediction about your whole life." Luke looked away. Henry continued, "Your leg is broken today. That is true. My life is falling apart. That is a story." Luke said nothing. On Wednesday, friends came to visit. On Thursday, Luke received another rejection email. He laughed bitterly when he read it. "Perfect." Henry looked up. "What?" "Another job rejection." Luke held up his phone. "Broken leg. No job. Living with my father. Amazing." Henry heard the anger underneath the joke. He did not correct him. Some lessons could not be forced. Friday morning, 2 military officers arrived at the Collins farm. The United States Army Reserve unit Luke belonged to had been activated for an overseas deployment. Luke had joined years earlier to help pay for college. His unit had been on standby for months. He had been expecting orders eventually. The officer reviewed Luke's medical documentation. The broken leg made immediate deployment impossible. His assignment was postponed. That afternoon, Luke learned that the deployment involved a region experiencing rapidly escalating violence. Several members of his unit were leaving within days. Luke sat silently for a long time. Finally, he looked at his father. Henry was repairing the same section of fence where the horse had escaped. Luke spoke first. "The horse ran away." Henry nodded. "Then it came back with 3 more. "Yes, I rode one." "You did." "I broke my leg." Henry waited. "And now, I am not deploying." Henry nodded. Luke stared at his cast. "What am I supposed to call that?" Henry stopped working. "I do not know." Luke laughed once. "Maybe?" Henry smiled. "Maybe." For the first time, Luke understood. His father was not indifferent. He was not emotionally numb. He was not refusing to celebrate good things or acknowledge painful ones. He was refusing something else. The desperate human need to declare the final meaning of an event before the story had finished unfolding. Luke had been doing that with his entire life. Lost job meant failure. Moving home meant embarrassment. Horse escaping meant disaster. Horse returning meant victory. Broken leg meant catastrophe. Every event received a label immediately. Good, bad, success, failure, lucky, unlucky. He had been judging chapters as though they were endings. That night, Luke asked his father, "So nothing is good or bad?" Henry shook his head. "That is not what I believe." Then what? I think some things hurt. Some things help. Some things are beautiful. Some things are terrible. He paused. But I have learned to be careful when my mind says, now I know exactly what this means for the rest of my life. Luke looked at his leg. For once, he did not ask when everything would get better. He did not ask why this had happened to him. He simply noticed what was true. His leg hurt. He was home. His father was alive. His future was uncertain. Nothing more needed to be decided that night. In Buddhist teaching, suffering often grows when the mind refuses to let an experience simply be what it is. We do not only experience events, we immediately judge them. We cling to what we call good. We fight what we call bad. We demand that pleasant things continue, but life keeps changing before our judgments can catch up. The Buddhist practice is not emotional indifference. It is clear seeing. This happened. This hurts. This is pleasant. This is difficult. And I do not yet know what it will become. When we loosen our grip on the labels, we create room to respond instead of react. Luke had spent years believing peace would come when his life finally started going the right way. What he learned from a missing horse, a broken leg, and a future he could not predict was far more useful. Sometimes, peace begins when you stop demanding to know whether this moment is a blessing or a disaster, and simply let it be this moment. Everyone trusted Thomas Hale because he never seemed angry. That was why the day he shouted at someone in public changed the way 300 people understood peace. Thomas was 58 and taught mindfulness at a community center in Portland, Oregon. He had spent more than 20 years practicing Zen. People came to his classes because he seemed steady in a way they desperately wanted to become. He listened without interrupting. He spoke slowly. He rarely reacted immediately. When someone challenged him, he paused before answering. When a student became emotional, Thomas never rushed to fix them. He simply stayed. His students admired that. Some idealized it. They imagined Thomas had somehow crossed a line the rest of them had not. A line beyond anger, beyond jealousy, beyond fear, beyond frustration. One of those students was a 34-year-old nurse named Emily Parker. Emily had started attending Thomas's classes after a year that had nearly exhausted her. She worked long hospital shifts. Her father was recovering from a stroke. Her relationship had ended badly. She had begun waking in the middle of the night, replaying conversations and imagining everything that could go wrong the next day. What she wanted from meditation was simple. She wanted to stop feeling so much, especially anger. Emily hated anger. Her mother had been angry throughout much of her childhood. Doors slammed. Voices rose. Small mistakes became accusations. Emily had promised herself she would never become that kind of person. So whenever anger appeared inside her, she pushed it down immediately. When a doctor spoke disrespectfully to her at work, Emily smiled. When her sister failed to help with their father, Emily said she understood. When her former boyfriend sent a cruel message, Emily deleted it and told herself she was above it. People called her patient. Inside, she felt like a sealed container under pressure. Thomas often said, "You do not become free by refusing to feel." Emily assumed he meant sadness. Surely, he did not mean anger. Then, one Saturday, Thomas led a full-day mindfulness workshop. During the afternoon session, a man named Richard began challenging nearly everything Thomas said. Richard was not cruel, but he was relentless. If Thomas spoke about acceptance, Richard called it passivity. If Thomas spoke about compassion, Richard called it weakness. If Thomas discussed non-attachment, Richard asked whether that was just another way to avoid responsibility. Thomas answered calmly, again and again. Then Richard interrupted a woman while she was describing the death of her husband. Maybe the real problem is that people use grief as an excuse to stay stuck. The room became silent. The woman stopped speaking. Thomas looked at Richard. "Do not do that again." His voice was firm. Richard shrugged. "I thought this was supposed to be an honest discussion." "It is. Then why are you censoring me?" I am asking you not to use another person's pain as material for your argument. Richard laughed. That sounds like your interpretation. Something changed in Thomas's face. Emily saw it immediately. His jaw tightened. His voice rose. Enough. The single word filled the room. Richard stared at him. Thomas continued. You have spent hours turning every person's vulnerability here into an intellectual contest. You do not have to agree with anything I teach, but you will not humiliate someone for grieving while I am responsible for this room. Nobody moved. Thomas was angry, not mildly irritated. Angry. His face was flushed. His breathing had changed. For Emily, the moment was almost shocking. Thomas Hale, the man who taught equanimity, had lost his temper. Richard gathered his things. Very peaceful, he said. Then he walked out. The workshop ended an hour later. Emily barely heard the remaining discussion. She kept thinking about Thomas raising his voice. After everyone left, she approached him. Can I ask you something? Of course. Are you okay? Thomas smiled slightly. I think so. You got really angry. Yes. Emily waited for him to explain it away. He did not. Finally, she said, I thought meditation was supposed to stop that. Thomas looked at her. Stop anger? Eventually. No. Emily frowned. Then what is the point? Thomas pulled out a chair. Emily sat across from him. He asked, Did you notice what happened after Richard left? You calmed down. Eventually, you apologized to the group. Yes. You kept teaching. Yes. Thomas leaned forward. That is the practice. Emily looked confused. I still got angry. Then you failed. Thomas shook his head. Why? Because you teach people not to be controlled by emotions. Correct. And you were angry. Being angry and being controlled by anger are not the same thing. Emily thought about it. Thomas continued. Anger appeared. I felt heat. My body tightened. My voice got louder. I wanted to say several things. I am very glad I did not say. Emily almost smiled. So you were holding back? I was aware. Is that different? Very. Thomas paused. If I had followed every impulse anger produced, I might have insulted him, humiliated him, said something designed to hurt him. I did not. But you still shouted. I did. Do you regret it? Thomas thought for several seconds. I regret that I lost some steadiness. I do not regret protecting that woman. Emily looked down. Thomas asked, What do you think anger is? Emily answered quickly. Bad. That is not an emotion. That is a judgment. She was quiet. Thomas continued. Anger can be destructive, but anger can also tell you that a boundary has been crossed, that something matters, that someone is being harmed. The problem is not that anger exists. What is the problem? When anger becomes the driver and awareness leaves the car. Emily remembered all the times she had suppressed anger because she was afraid it made her a bad person. At work, with her sister, with her ex-boyfriend. She had never asked what the anger was trying to tell her. She had only tried to erase it. What happens if you do not express it? She asked. Thomas answered. Then it often finds another door. Emily knew exactly what that meant. Her headaches, her sleepless nights, the conversations she replayed at 2 a.m, the sudden resentment she felt toward people who had no idea she was upset. She whispered, I thought peaceful people did not get angry. Thomas shook his head. Peaceful people get angry. Then what makes them peaceful? They do not build a home inside the anger. That sentence stayed with Emily. A week later, her sister called. Their father needed transportation to another medical appointment. Emily's sister said she could not help. Again. Normally, Emily would have said, It is fine, then spent the rest of the day furious. This time, she noticed the anger, heat, tightness, the thought, she always does this to me. Emily took a breath, then said, I am angry. Her sister became defensive. I told you I am busy. I know, but I need you to hear me. I have handled almost every appointment for 3 months. I cannot keep doing this alone. There was silence. Emily's heart pounded. She wanted to apologize for sounding upset. She did not. Her sister eventually said, "I did not realize you felt that way, because I never told you." They did not solve everything in one conversation, but the truth finally entered the relationship. Emily felt anger that evening. She also felt relief. For the first time, anger had not become an explosion or a secret. It had become information. Months later, Emily understood what Thomas had shown her that afternoon. Buddhist practice does not ask a human being to become emotionally blank. It does not demand that sadness stop arriving, that fear never appear, that anger vanish forever. The practice is to recognize emotion as something arising within awareness. Anger is here, fear is here, grief is here, but anger is not the totality of who I am. In Buddhism, emotions are like weather. A storm can be real without becoming the entire sky. Anger can move through the body without becoming an identity. You can feel it without feeding it, listen to it without worshipping it, learn from it without handing it control of your words and actions. Emily had spent most of her life afraid that feeling anger meant becoming an angry person. Now she understood the difference. A peaceful person is not someone who never experiences a storm. A peaceful person is someone who remembers, even while the storm is passing through, that the sky is still there. Rachel Morgan had spent 14 months trying to keep her daughter alive with the force of her own fear. She checked every number, every appointment, every medication, every symptom, every possible treatment, every new study, every online forum, every story about someone who had survived. Her daughter, Lily, was 17. Before the diagnosis, Rachel had worried about ordinary things: college applications, driving at night, bad grades, boys, whether Lily was sleeping enough, whether she spent too much time on her phone. Then one afternoon, a doctor said the word cancer. After that, every old worry looked almost innocent. Rachel stopped thinking in weeks and months. She began thinking in test results, blood counts, scans, treatment cycles, percentages. The language of medicine took over her life. When Lily's numbers improved, Rachel breathed. When they worsened, she panicked. If a doctor said, "We will have to wait and see," Rachel heard only danger. She hated uncertainty more than she hated exhaustion. Uncertainty meant there was something she could not control. And Rachel had become convinced that if she stopped controlling everything for even a moment, something terrible would happen. She researched until 2 in the morning. She woke before sunrise. She prepared questions for doctors. She tracked meals. She tracked sleep. She tracked pain. She tracked every small change in Lily's face. Friends told Rachel she was incredibly strong. Rachel did not feel strong. She felt terrified. But terror can look a lot like strength when it never stops moving. Lily noticed. One evening, after a difficult treatment, she looked at her mother and said, "Mom, you are watching me, like I am about to disappear." Rachel forced a smile. "I am just making sure you are okay." "I know. Do you need anything?" "No." "Are you nauseous?" "No." "Do you want water?" "No." "Are you sure?" Lily closed her eyes. "Mom." "What?" "Can you just sit with me without trying to fix something?" Rachel stopped. The question hurt. "I am trying to help you." "I know. Then what do you want me to do?" "Nothing." Rachel did not understand. Nothing felt irresponsible. Nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt like surrender. So she stood up and adjusted Lily's blanket, checked the medication schedule, refilled the water glass. Anything except nothing. Months passed. The treatment worked for a while. Then it did not. The doctors changed strategies. Rachel changed with them. New medications, new specialists, new questions, new hope, new fear. Then came a scan that showed the disease had progressed. The doctor spoke gently. Rachel barely heard him. She heard phrases: more aggressive, limited options, focus on quality of life. Rachel felt something inside her reject every word. "No." The doctor paused. Rachel shook her head. "No. There has to be something else." We can discuss additional options, then discuss them. We will. I want everything. Lily was sitting beside her. Rachel did not look at her. She was already fighting, already searching, already moving into the next plan. On the drive home, Lily said, "Mom." Rachel kept her eyes forward. "What? I am tired." "I know. We will get home soon." "No." Rachel looked at her. Lily's voice was quiet. "I am tired of fighting every second." Rachel felt anger rise instantly. "You do not get to say that." Lily looked at her. Rachel heard herself and immediately knew how it sounded. But fear had already taken control. "You are 17. You do not get to give up." "I did not say I am giving up." "Then what are you saying?" "I am saying I want to live while I am still here." Rachel could not answer. Lily continued, "Everything is about the next scan, the next treatment, the next appointment. You keep telling me we just have to get through this part." Tears appeared in Rachel's eyes. "We do, but what if my whole life becomes something we are trying to get through?" Rachel gripped the steering wheel. She wanted to argue. She wanted to tell Lily that hope mattered, that fighting mattered, that giving up was not an option. Instead, she heard her daughter's question again. "What if my whole life becomes something we are trying to get through?" That night, Rachel could not sleep. She searched for clinical trials, read medical papers she barely understood, saved 3 links, deleted 2, opened another. Then Lily's voice returned. "I want to live while I am still here." Rachel closed the laptop. For the first time in months, she had nothing to do, and without activity, fear arrived fully. She cried, not because she had accepted anything. She had not. She cried because she finally felt how desperately she had been trying to negotiate with reality. If she researched enough, maybe Lily would stay. If she asked enough questions, maybe Lily would stay. If she worried enough, maybe Lily would stay. Some part of Rachel believed that relaxing her grip would cause the loss she feared, as though anxiety itself were holding her daughter in the world. A few days later, Rachel attended a support group at the hospital. She did not want advice. She barely wanted to be there. An older man spoke about losing his wife. He said something Rachel could not stop thinking about. "For a long time, I thought accepting what was happening meant agreeing with it." Rachel looked up. The man continued, "I thought if I accepted reality, I was betraying her. Then I realized reality did not need my permission." Rachel felt almost offended, but he kept speaking. "Acceptance did not mean I wanted her to die. It meant I stopped spending every remaining moment arguing with the fact that she was sick." Rachel left before the group ended. For several days, she hated the idea. Then, one afternoon, Lily asked to sit outside. Rachel brought blankets, water, medication, her phone. Lily looked at the phone. "Can you put that away? What if the doctor calls? Then you can call back." Rachel hesitated, then placed the phone inside the house. They sat together. Lily leaned against her. For several minutes, neither spoke. Rachel's mind screamed for something to do. Check her temperature, ask about pain, look at her color, search for signs. Instead, Rachel noticed Lily breathing. In, out, in, out. Then, a red leaf drifted down from a tree nearby. Rachel watched it move. Another followed, then another. She looked up at the branches. Some leaves still held tightly, others released easily. One particular leaf shook again and again, but remained attached. Rachel stared at it longer than she meant to. She felt an irrational desire for it to stay. "Hold on, just stay." The thought came so quickly that Rachel almost laughed. Then she started crying. Lily lifted her head. "Mom?" Rachel pointed toward the tree. "Nothing." Lily looked. "What?" "That leaf." Lily waited. Rachel wiped her face. "I keep wanting it not to fall." Lily understood before Rachel finished. Neither said anything. They watched. The leaf trembled, trembled again, then released. Rachel expected the moment to feel like defeat. It did not. The leaf did not fail. The branch did not betray it. Nothing had gone wrong. Something had changed, because change was what life did. Rachel took Lily's hand. For the first time since the diagnosis, she did not make a promise about the future. She did not say everything would be okay. She did not say they would beat this. She did not say they had to stay positive. She simply said, "I am here." Lily squeezed her hand. "I know." From that day forward, Rachel still went to every appointment. She still asked questions. She still hoped. She still searched for treatment when treatment made sense. But she began separating love from control. Some evenings, she sat with Lily without discussing illness. They watched old comedies, talked about childhood memories, argued about music, ate ice cream when Lily could tolerate it. Sometimes Rachel became afraid again and disappeared into planning. Then she noticed. She returned. The fear did not vanish. It changed its position. It was no longer the only thing in the room. There was fear and love, grief and laughter, uncertainty, and this breath. In Buddhist teaching, impermanence does not ask us to stop loving what changes. It asks us to see that change is already part of everything we love. Acceptance is not approval. It is not resignation. It is not refusing treatment, abandoning hope, or pretending pain does not matter. It is the courage to stop demanding that reality become different before we are willing to be present with it. Rachel had believed that holding tighter was the same as loving more. But love did not require her to control the future. Love required her to be here while the present was still here. And when she finally understood that, she stopped trying to keep every leaf on the branch. She simply held her daughter's hand while the leaves continued to fall. Margaret Ellis had drunk coffee every morning for 53 years. She did not truly taste it until the morning she believed it might be her last. Margaret was 78 and lived in Minneapolis, Minnesota. She had raised 3 children, buried a husband, survived breast cancer, changed careers twice, watched her children become parents, watched friends move away, become sick, recover, disappear. She had lived long enough to understand that life could change without asking permission. Still, she had spent most of those years behaving as though tomorrow were guaranteed. Coffee was part of that routine. Wake up, make coffee, drink it, while checking the news, think about errands, answer messages, plan dinner, remember something she had forgotten yesterday. The cup was always there, so Margaret rarely noticed it. Then her doctor called. A scan had revealed a serious problem with her heart. More tests were needed. There were options. Nothing had been decided. But the doctor also said a sentence Margaret heard with perfect clarity. "You should prepare for the possibility that this is more serious than we hoped." Margaret thanked him, hung up, and sat alone. She did not cry immediately. Instead, she became practical. She called her daughter, Anna, updated a folder containing important documents, checked the beneficiaries on an old account, wrote down passwords, made a list of questions for the cardiologist. For 2 days, Margaret managed mortality like a household project. Then Anna arrived. "You do not have to organize your own death before we even know what is happening." Margaret looked at her. "I am being responsible. You are terrified." Margaret stiffened. "I am not terrified." Anna gave her the look only a daughter can give a mother. Margaret looked away. "Fine." She took a breath. "I am terrified." Anna sat beside her. Margaret continued. "I keep thinking about everything I have not done." "Like what?" "I do not know." "Then how can you be worried about it?" "Because there must be something." Anna almost smiled. Margaret did not. "I always thought there would be more time." Anna reached for her hand. Margaret pulled it away gently. "I do not mean I wasted my life. I know. I had a good life. I know, but I cannot remember half of it." Anna said nothing. Margaret looked down at her hands. "I remember the big things. Your graduation, your wedding, your father dying, the grandchildren being born." She paused. "But most of life is not big things." Anna waited. Margaret continued. "It is Tuesday mornings, driving to the grocery store, drinking coffee, talking to someone for 10 minutes. I spent so many of those moments thinking about something else. That night, Margaret slept poorly. She imagined hospital rooms, procedures, her children receiving phone calls. She imagined dying. Then she imagined not dying and felt guilty for being dramatic. At 4 in the morning, she stopped trying to sleep. She made coffee. Normally, she would have turned on the television. Instead, she left it off. She carried the cup to the table. Her hand moved automatically toward her phone. She stopped. A thought appeared. What if this is one of your last mornings? Margaret felt fear, then irritation. She did not want to turn coffee into a spiritual ceremony. She wanted ordinary life back. But another thought followed. What if ordinary life was the thing you never noticed? Margaret lifted the cup. She felt its warmth against her hands. She smelled the coffee before drinking. She had bought the same roast for years. It smelled stronger than she remembered. She took one sip. Her first impulse was to swallow quickly. Instead, she let herself taste it. Bitter, warm, slightly sweet from the milk. Then another flavor she could not name. She swallowed. Something happened inside her. Not enlightenment. Grief. Margaret began crying. She thought of her husband, Robert. For 39 years, he had made the morning coffee. He always made it stronger than she liked. She complained. Every morning, Robert, this could wake the dead. And every morning he answered, then it is doing its job. After he died, Margaret had spent months trying to reproduce his coffee exactly. She never could. Eventually she stopped trying. Now, 13 years later, she could almost hear him. Margaret took another sip. She remembered mornings when Robert tried to tell her something while she read the newspaper. Mornings when one of the children called and she rushed them off the phone because she had somewhere to be. Mornings, she resented Monday. Mornings, she waited for Friday. Mornings, she counted the days until vacation. She had spent so much time waiting for life to become more interesting. And now she would have traded almost anything for one completely ordinary morning with her husband complaining about the strength of the coffee. Anna arrived later that morning. She found Margaret at the table with another cup. You are up early. I have been up for hours. Could not sleep? No. Anna reached for the coffee pot. Margaret said, wait. Anna looked at her. What? Sit down. I was going to get coffee. You can. Margaret smiled. But sit with me when you drink it. Anna poured a cup and sat. For several minutes, Margaret said nothing. Anna eventually laughed. This is strange. What is? You. Sitting quietly. I know. Are you okay? Margaret looked at her daughter. I think I have been drinking coffee wrong for 50 years. Anna laughed. Margaret did too. Then Anna's expression changed. You are scared. Yes. Me too. Margaret reached across the table. This time, when Anna took her hand, Margaret did not pull away. They talked, not about medical decisions, not about paperwork. They talked about Robert, about Anna as a child, about mistakes Margaret regretted, about things Anna had never known. At one point, Anna began crying. Margaret wanted to reassure her. Instead, she simply stayed. The tests came 3 days later. The diagnosis was serious, but treatable. Margaret would need surgery. Her doctor was cautiously optimistic. When Anna heard the news, she cried with relief. Margaret felt relief too. Then something unexpected happened. She noticed her mind trying to return immediately to normal. Good. You are probably going to be fine. Now get back to life. But Margaret did not want to get back to the life she had been living. She wanted to enter it differently. After surgery and recovery, she kept one new habit. The first cup of coffee each morning belonged to nothing else. No phone, no television, no newspaper, no list. She simply drank it. Sometimes it tasted wonderful, sometimes too bitter. Sometimes she became distracted halfway through. Then she noticed and returned. Months later, Anna visited with Margaret's granddaughter, Sophie. Sophie was 17 and constantly on her phone. Margaret placed a cup of hot chocolate in front of her. Sophie said, "Thanks." Without looking up, Margaret smiled. "Before you drink that, give me 30 seconds. Sophie looked suspicious. "For what?" "Nothing. That sounds very grandmother." "Probably." Sophie put down the phone. Margaret said, "Take one sip, like it is the last cup you will ever have." Sophie frowned. "That is depressing." Margaret shook her head. "No, it is the opposite." Sophie took a sip. Margaret watched her face change slightly. "It is actually really good." Margaret smiled. "Most things are when you arrive in time to experience them." In Buddhist teaching, impermanence is not meant to make us afraid of losing everything. It reminds us why everything matters now. The people we love will change. Our bodies will change. The morning will end. The cup will empty. Nothing can be held permanently. And because it cannot be held, it can finally be appreciated without pretending it belongs to us forever. Margaret had once believed awareness of death would make life smaller. Instead, it made an ordinary cup of coffee enormous. Not because the coffee had changed, because she had finally stopped assuming there would always be another one. The first time Olivia Carter had a panic attack, she thought she was dying. The second time, she was more afraid because she knew exactly what it was. Olivia was 36 and worked as a corporate attorney in Manhattan. She had spent most of her adult life becoming difficult to replace. She answered messages late at night. She volunteered for the cases no one wanted. She remembered details other people missed. She stayed calm when negotiations became hostile. She could work 14 hours, sleep 5, and return the next morning looking prepared. Her partners loved that. Clients trusted it. Olivia built her identity around it. Then her body stopped cooperating. The first panic attack happened during a conference call. Her heart began pounding. Her hands became cold. Her chest tightened. She could not take a satisfying breath. For several seconds, Olivia was convinced something was wrong with her heart. She muted the call, stood up, walked into the restroom, splashed water on her face, then returned to the meeting. No one noticed. That almost made it worse. A terrifying thing had happened inside her, and the world had continued as though nothing had happened. She went to a doctor. Her heart was healthy. The doctor asked about stress. Olivia laughed. "Everyone in my job is stressed." "How much do you sleep?" "Enough." "How much is enough?" Olivia changed the subject. She was given recommendations. Rest more. Reduce caffeine. Take breaks. Consider therapy. Olivia followed almost none of them. She did not have time to become less stressed. She had deadlines. A major trial was approaching. Her team depended on her. She told herself the panic attack had been an isolated event. Then it happened again. This time she was sitting in the back of a car on the way to work. Her breathing changed. Her chest tightened. The thought arrived instantly. Not again. That thought became fuel. What if it gets worse? What if I cannot stop it? What if it happens in court? What if I lose control in front of everyone? By the time the car reached the office, Olivia was trembling. She told the driver she needed a moment. He nodded. Olivia stayed in the back seat. Her hand hovered over the door handle. She had a meeting in 8 minutes. 8 minutes. That number felt like a threat. Her mind started giving commands. Move. Get upstairs. Check your notes. Drink water. Fix your face. Do not let anyone see. Olivia reached for the door, then stopped. She was exhausted, not ordinary tiredness, something deeper. She suddenly realized she had been trying to escape every uncomfortable second of her life by rushing into the next one, the next email, the next meeting, the next case, the next accomplishment, the next hour. Maybe the next moment would feel safer. It never did. Olivia put her phone face down. She sat back. Her heart was still racing. She did not know how to meditate. She did not know the right breathing technique. She did not know what she was supposed to think. So she did the only thing available. She noticed one breath. In, out. Her mind immediately interrupted. You are going to be late. Olivia noticed another breath. In, out. This is stupid. Another. In. Out. Your heart is still racing. Another. In. Out. For 5 minutes, Olivia did not try to become calm. She simply stopped adding instructions. Her body remained uncomfortable, but the panic stopped climbing. That surprised her. When she finally entered the office, nothing had been solved. Her workload had not disappeared. Her trial date had not changed. Her inbox still contained dozens of messages, but she felt slightly more present. Not peaceful. Present. That difference mattered. The next morning, Olivia arrived early. She stayed in the car for 1 minute. No phone, no email, no mental rehearsal. Just 1 minute. The first week, she hated it. Her mind treated stillness like negligence. You should be working. Someone needs you. You are falling behind. Olivia stayed anyway. 1 minute became 3, sometimes 5. Then she started adding smaller pauses elsewhere. Before entering the courthouse, she stopped for one breath. Before answering a difficult email, she felt her feet against the floor. Before calling a client after bad news, she unclenched her jaw. Before walking into her apartment at night, she stood outside the door for 30 seconds. She imagined placing the workday down before entering. At first, that felt artificial. Then one evening, she opened the apartment door and realized she had not checked her phone during the entire elevator ride. It was the longest uninterrupted silence she had experienced all week. Olivia began calling these moments her landing places. She did not tell anyone. They were too small to sound important. But over time, they changed how she moved through the day. She noticed how often urgency was genuine, and how often urgency was simply the emotional atmosphere of her profession. Someone sent an email marked urgent. Olivia's body reacted before she had even read it. Someone called twice. Her heart rate increased. A partner walked quickly toward her office. Her mind prepared for disaster. She had been absorbing other people's nervous systems for years without knowing it. Now there was sometimes a pause. Not always, but sometimes. One afternoon, a junior attorney named Marcus walked into Olivia's office, looking overwhelmed. "We have a problem." Normally, Olivia would have matched his energy immediately. What happened? Instead, she saw his breathing. Fast. She noticed her own body preparing to imitate him. Olivia took one breath before answering. "Tell me exactly what happened." Marcus explained. A filing contained an error. It was serious, but fixable. 10 minutes later, they had a plan. Afterward, Marcus said, "I thought you were going to lose it." Olivia almost smiled. So did I. That evening, she realized something. Her pauses were no longer only protecting her from panic. They were changing the emotional temperature around her. When she slowed down, other people sometimes slowed down too. Months passed. Olivia still worked a demanding job. She still had deadlines. She still experienced anxiety. There were mornings when she skipped the pause and immediately regretted it. There were difficult weeks when 5 quiet minutes felt impossible, but she stopped treating those moments as evidence that the practice had failed. She simply returned when she remembered. One night, after a long day, Olivia sat outside her apartment door. 30 seconds. That was all. Her phone contained unanswered messages. Her mind contained unfinished arguments. Her body contained tension. She breathed. Then she opened the door. Her sister was visiting. She looked up from the couch. "Long day?" Olivia put down her bag. "Very. Do you need to work?" Olivia almost said yes. There was always work. Instead, she sat beside her. Not for the next 10 minutes. Her sister smiled. For 10 minutes. Olivia was not an attorney, not a problem solver, not the most reliable person in the room. She was simply a human being sitting beside someone she loved. In Buddhist practice, stillness does not have to be large to be real. A monastery is not required. An empty calendar is not required. Perfect silence is not required. The practice can live in the smallest transitions. 1 breath before speaking, 1 minute before entering work, 30 seconds before opening the door at home. a pause before reacting. These moments do not remove responsibility. They interrupt automatic suffering. They create a small space between what happens and what we do next. Olivia once believed peace would arrive when life finally became less demanding. What she discovered was the opposite. Life might remain demanding, but she did not have to meet every demand with panic. Sometimes, the sanctuary she had been waiting for was not another place. It was 5 minutes in a parked car. 5 minutes in which nothing changed, except the person who stepped out. For 12 years, Jonathan Price kept changing his life because he was convinced peace was waiting somewhere he had not reached yet. He changed cities, jobs, apartments, relationships, therapists, morning routines, meditation styles, even the side of the bed he slept on. Every change brought relief. For a little while, then the same restlessness returned. Jonathan was 47 and had spent most of his career in advertising. He was talented, creative, well-paid, and permanently dissatisfied. In Los Angeles, he blamed traffic. In San Francisco, he blamed the cost of living. In Denver, he blamed the winter. In Austin, he blamed the heat. When he worked from an office, he wanted freedom. When he worked from home, he missed people. When he was single, he wanted intimacy. When he was in a relationship, he wanted space. Jonathan did not think of himself as unhappy. He thought of himself as someone who had not yet found the right conditions. That belief became his favorite form of hope. The next city would fit. The next job would be meaningful. The next relationship would feel easy. The next meditation practice would finally quiet his mind. Then, after a brutal year at work and the end of another relationship, Jonathan took a leave of absence. He told friends he needed perspective. Privately, he was exhausted. His mind had become impossible to live with. He woke thinking, worked thinking, ate thinking, drove thinking, went to bed thinking. Even meditation became another arena for frustration. He would sit down for 20 minutes and spend 18 of them judging the fact that his mind was not quiet. Eventually, a friend suggested a Buddhist retreat center in Northern California. Jonathan liked the idea immediately. A retreat sounded clean, simple, far away from everything that irritated him. He imagined waking early, walking in silence, eating healthy food, finally becoming the calm version of himself he had always believed was hidden beneath the right circumstances. The first retreat lasted 7 days. Jonathan loved the first 2. No email, no deadlines, no traffic, no meetings, no relationship problems. He felt lighter almost immediately. This is it, he thought. This is what I needed. By day 3, the problems began. Someone coughed repeatedly during meditation. Jonathan found it unbearable. The floor cushion hurt his knees. Breakfast was too plain. The morning bell was too early. One participant breathed loudly. Another moved constantly. The teacher spoke too slowly. By day 5, Jonathan was furious. He had paid good money to find peace, and somehow ended up sitting beside the loudest breather in America. On the final day, he left convinced that the retreat center simply had not been the right one, so he found another. This one was quieter, too quiet. The next one had better food, too much talking. Another retreat emphasized strict discipline. Jonathan called it rigid. Another emphasized compassion. Jonathan called it vague. One teacher seemed too intellectual. Another seemed too mystical. One community felt cliquish. Another felt impersonal. For nearly 3 years, Jonathan became an expert in spiritual dissatisfaction. He knew every reason a meditation center could disappoint him. He also knew exactly what peace should feel like. That was the problem. Then he met an older teacher named Samuel. Samuel had practiced Zen for more than 30 years and lived near a small retreat center in Oregon. Jonathan arrived for a weekend program. By Saturday afternoon, he already had complaints. The building was old. The meditation hall was cold. Someone had parked too close to his car. Dinner was late. Samuel listened, while Jonathan explained each problem. Finally, Samuel asked, "How many retreats have you attended?" Jonathan thought, "Maybe 20. And none were right?" "Not completely." Samuel nodded. "How many cities have you lived in?" 5. "How many careers?" 3. "Depending on how you count." "Relationships?" Jonathan frowned. "What does that have to do with this?" Samuel did not answer. Instead, he asked, "What are you looking for?" "Peace." Samuel nodded. "And what does peace require?" Jonathan answered immediately. "Space. Quiet. The right environment. People who are serious about practice. Less distraction." Samuel smiled. "That sounds expensive." Jonathan laughed. "I am serious." "So am I." Samuel leaned forward. "What happens when someone coughs?" "I get distracted." "What happens when dinner is late?" "I get annoyed." "When the room is cold?" "I cannot focus." "When people talk too much?" "It defeats the point." Samuel nodded, then asked, "Have you noticed that wherever you go, the same person keeps arriving?" Jonathan stared at him. Samuel continued, "The room changes. The teacher changes. The city changes. The weather changes." He paused. "But you keep bringing Jonathan." Jonathan felt offended. "I am trying to grow." "I believe you." "Then why does that sound like criticism?" "Because part of you already knows what I am saying." Jonathan crossed his arms. Samuel waited. Finally, Jonathan asked, "So I should just accept bad environments?" "No." "Then what?" "Choose wisely." Samuel spoke slowly. "Environment matters. Community matters. Teachers matter. Noise matters. Sleep matters. But if your peace requires the world to stop irritating you, you are not practicing peace." Jonathan said nothing. Samuel continued, "You are practicing control." The word landed hard. Control. Jonathan had used the language of growth for years, but underneath it was a demand. Life should cooperate. People should behave. Rooms should be quiet. Relationships should be easy. His mind should be still. He had never noticed how many conditions he placed around peace. Samuel stood. "Come with me." They walked into the meditation hall. Someone was arranging cushions. A chair scraped across the floor. Jonathan automatically tensed. Samuel noticed. "There." "What?" "That." Jonathan looked confused. "The sound?" "No." "What happened inside you after the sound?" Jonathan paid attention. The chair scraped again. Irritation appeared instantly. Then a thought. They should be quieter. Then another. How can anyone meditate like this? Samuel said. The chair made one sound. Your mind made 10. Jonathan almost laughed. Samuel sat down. Jonathan sat across from him. What am I supposed to do with that? Notice it. Then what? Nothing. Jonathan hated that answer. Samuel continued. You have spent years trying to build a world that never activates your mind. What if you learned to observe activation instead? Jonathan looked down. His entire life suddenly felt visible. The new apartments, the new jobs, the new relationships, the retreat centers, the complaints. Each time discomfort appeared, he assumed the environment had failed him. He had never stayed long enough to study the part of himself that always wanted something different. That evening, Jonathan made a decision, not a dramatic one. He would stay, not forever, just long enough to stop escaping every irritation. For the next 6 months, he returned to the same retreat center once a month. The building remained old. The hall remained cold in winter. People still coughed. Meals were occasionally late. Jonathan still became annoyed. But now annoyance itself became part of the practice. Cold, resistance, noise, judgment, expectation. He began seeing that peace did not arrive when irritation disappeared. Peace appeared in the moment he could notice irritation without immediately obeying it. Months later, Jonathan returned home and decided not to move. For once, he stayed in the same apartment, stayed at the same company, stopped searching for the perfect meditation method. He simplified. One practice, one teacher, one place to return to. His life did not become perfect. It became real. In Buddhism, wise conditions matter. We choose companions carefully. We create environments that support awareness. We protect the mind from unnecessary agitation when we can. But no perfect environment can free us from a mind that demands perfection. The Buddhist path does not ask us to stop making healthy changes. It asks us to look closely at the impulse that says peace is always somewhere else. Jonathan had traveled thousands of miles looking for the right place. What he finally discovered was almost embarrassing in its simplicity. Sometimes the place that needs changing is not the room. It is the part of us that cannot stop demanding another one. For most of his life, Daniel Foster believed peace belonged to people who knew something he did not. So he spent 20 years looking for them. Teachers, therapists, pastors, meditation instructors, authors, doctors, coaches, anyone who seemed calmer than he felt. Daniel was 51 and lived outside Raleigh, North Carolina. He owned a small architectural firm, had been married for 26 years, and had 2 adult daughters. Nothing about his life looked broken, but Daniel had never trusted himself. Whenever he faced a difficult decision, he wanted someone else to tell him what to do. When his business struggled, he hired a consultant. When his marriage became tense, he bought books. When anxiety kept him awake, he searched for experts. When grief came after his father's death, he attended workshops. Every new teacher gave him hope. This person understands. This method might finally work. For several weeks, sometimes several months, Daniel would follow everything perfectly. Wake at 5, write 3 pages, meditate 20 minutes, take cold showers, repeat affirmations, count breaths, track moods, avoid certain foods, read certain books. Then, eventually something difficult would happen. An argument, a financial problem, a sleepless night, a wave of fear, and Daniel would think, it stopped working, so he searched again. His wife, Karen, noticed the pattern. You are always waiting for someone to hand you the answer. Daniel became defensive. What is wrong with learning from people? Nothing. Then what is the problem? Karen looked at him carefully. You never believe anything until someone else says it. Daniel dismissed the comment, but he remembered it. A few months later, one of his daughters called him. She had been offered a job in another state and could not decide whether to take it. Dad, what would you do? Daniel immediately began analyzing. Salary, cost of living, career growth, housing, distance, benefits. He talked for nearly 10 minutes. Then his daughter interrupted. I did not ask for a spreadsheet. Daniel stopped. What do you want from me? I do not know. She sounded exhausted. I just wish somebody could tell me the right answer. Daniel heard his own voice inside hers. That frightened him. He took a breath. What do you want? I do not know. What are you afraid of? Making the wrong choice. Daniel almost said something reassuring. Instead, he sat quietly. His daughter said, Dad, I am here. Tell me what to do. Daniel looked at the stack of self-help books on his desk. For the first time, he noticed how desperately he had asked the same question his whole life. Tell me what to do. Tell me what is safe. Tell me what will happen. Tell me how to avoid regret. Tell me which path will guarantee peace. He said, I cannot. His daughter became silent. Daniel continued, I can help you think. I can tell you what I see, but I cannot know your life for you. She exhaled. That is not very helpful. I know. Then Daniel added, maybe it is the most honest thing I have ever told you. A week later, Daniel attended a Buddhist retreat led by an elderly teacher named Michael Chen. Daniel expected techniques. Instead, Michael spent much of the retreat asking questions. On the final evening, Daniel stayed behind. I need to ask you something. Michael nodded. Daniel said, how do I know I am doing this correctly? Michael smiled. Daniel almost laughed. I knew you were going to do that. Do what? Smile instead of answering. Michael laughed. All right. What do you mean by correctly? I mean, how do I know I am making progress? Are you paying attention? Sometimes. Are you becoming more aware of your reactions? Yes. Are you noticing when fear takes over, more than before? Do you return when you notice? I try. Michael nodded. Then continue. Daniel frowned. That is it? What were you hoping for? I do not know. Something more certain. Michael looked at him. Certainty is what you keep trying to purchase from teachers. Daniel felt exposed. Michael continued. You do not actually want guidance. Daniel stiffened. Then what do I want? Guarantees. The word landed harder than Daniel expected. Michael continued. You want someone to promise that if you follow the correct practice, you will never make the wrong decision, never feel anxious, never lose anyone, never suffer. Daniel looked away. Would that be so terrible? It would be wonderful. Michael paused. But no honest teacher can give it to you. Daniel sat silently. Michael asked, why do you think you keep changing methods? Because they stop working, or because eventually they bring you back to yourself? Daniel looked at him. Michael continued, at first, a teacher feels powerful because they give you direction, but eventually, the practice asks you to look directly at your own mind. He tapped the floor gently. No teacher can do that part for you. Daniel thought about every system he had abandoned. Each one had worked until it stopped distracting him from uncertainty. Then he blamed the system. Michael said, there is an old Buddhist teaching about this. Daniel smiled faintly. Of course there is. Michael laughed. Near the end of his life, the Buddha's students were afraid. They had depended on him for years. They wanted to know who would guide them after he was gone. Daniel listened, and the teaching that remained was not, find another person to depend on forever. It was closer to this. Be a light unto yourself. Practice. See clearly. Do not hand away the responsibility of awakening. Daniel asked. So teachers do not matter. They matter enormously. That sounds contradictory. It is not. Michael leaned forward. A good teacher points toward the moon. The problem begins when the student spends the rest of his life worshipping the finger. Daniel laughed, then became quiet. For years, he had collected fingers, books, podcasts, methods, authorities, people whose confidence temporarily protected him from his own uncertainty. What if I trust myself and I am wrong? Michael answered immediately. You will be wrong sometimes. Daniel looked surprised. That is not comforting. It is true. Michael continued. Wisdom is not becoming incapable of mistakes. It is becoming capable of meeting mistakes without collapsing. That sentence stayed with Daniel. Months later, his company faced a difficult decision. A major client offered a lucrative contract that would require Daniel's team to work at an unsustainable pace for nearly a year. His partners wanted the money. His employees were already exhausted. Normally, Daniel would have called 3 advisors. This time, he gathered information, listened to his partners, listened to his staff, went home, sat quietly. Fear appeared. If you decline, the company could suffer. Then another voice. If you accept, your people will suffer. Daniel noticed both. He did not ask fear to disappear. He did not wait for perfect certainty. The next morning, he declined the contract. For 2 weeks, he wondered whether he had made a mistake. Then something changed. He realized uncertainty had not destroyed him. He could make a choice without possessing the future. He could listen deeply without surrendering his responsibility. He could seek advice without handing away his life. That evening, Karen found him sitting outside without a book or headphones. What are you doing? Nothing. She smiled. That is new. Daniel nodded. I think I finally understand what you meant. About what? Waiting for someone to give me the answer. Karen sat beside him. And? Daniel took a slow breath. I do not think anyone has it. Karen laughed. That sounds depressing. It is actually the opposite. In Buddhism, teachers can guide us. Stories can inspire us. Practices can train us. Community can support us. but none of them can become aware on our behalf. No one else can breathe this breath for us. No one else can observe this thought. No one else can decide whether we respond with fear, anger, compassion, or clarity. The path eventually turns inward, not toward isolation, toward responsibility. Daniel had spent years searching for a person strong enough to remove uncertainty from his life. What he finally found was quieter. No rescue, no perfect answer, no guarantee, only awareness, a breath, a choice, and enough light to take the next step without needing to see the entire road. Claire Anderson had forgiven people who lied to her, betrayed her, abandoned her, and broke promises they once swore they would keep. But for 9 years, she could not forgive herself for one unanswered phone call. Claire was 45 and worked as a registered nurse at a hospital outside Columbus, Ohio. She had spent most of her adult life taking care of people on their worst days. She knew how to sit beside frightened patients, how to speak gently to families receiving terrible news, how to remain calm when someone was angry because fear had nowhere else to go. She understood pain, at least when it belonged to someone else. When a patient apologized for crying, Claire would say, "You do not have to apologize for being human." When a family member blamed themselves for not noticing an illness sooner, Claire would say, "You made the best decisions you could with what you knew at the time." When someone made a mistake, she understood context, exhaustion, fear, confusion, pressure, human limitation. Claire could find compassion for almost anyone, except the woman she had been 9 years earlier. It happened on a Wednesday. Claire was 36 then, working an understaffed 12-hour shift that became 14. One patient went into cardiac arrest. Another family demanded to speak with a physician who was unavailable. A new nurse made a medication error that had to be reported. Claire had not eaten since breakfast. She had not sat down for more than 5 minutes. Her phone remained in her locker for most of the day. When she finally checked it, she saw 3 missed calls. One was from her mother. Claire stared at the screen. Her mother, Diane, called often, sometimes because she needed something, sometimes because she had seen something funny on television, sometimes because she wanted to tell Claire about a neighbor Claire barely remembered. Claire loved her mother, but on exhausted days, those calls could feel like one more person needing something from her. A voicemail notification appeared. Claire almost listened. Then another nurse called her name. A patient needed help. Claire locked the phone and returned to work. She told herself she would call her mother on the drive home. She forgot. At 9:47 that night, Claire walked through her front door, dropped her bag, and went directly to the shower. Her phone was charging in the kitchen. She never heard it ring. At 10:23, Claire came downstairs. There were 7 missed calls, 2 from her sister, 1 from a number she did not recognize, 4 more from her sister. Claire knew before she called back. Something inside her knew. Her mother had collapsed at home. A neighbor had found her. An ambulance had taken her to the hospital. By the time Claire arrived, her mother was gone. The doctors said it was sudden, a massive cardiac event. There was nothing Claire could have done from across town. There was probably nothing anyone could have done, even if they had been in the room. Claire heard every word. None of it mattered, because her mother had called her that afternoon, and Claire had not answered. For weeks, people tried to comfort her. "You were working. You could not have known. Your mother knew you loved her. It was not your fault." Claire nodded when they spoke, then went home and punished herself. She listened to the voicemail exactly once. Her mother's voice sounded normal. "Hi, honey. Just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. I was thinking maybe you could come over this weekend. Love you." That was all. No fear, no emergency, no hidden warning. But Claire's mind rewrote it. What if she had been feeling something? What if she knew? What if she was scared? What if she just wanted to hear my voice? What if I had answered? One question became a prison. What if? For 9 years, Claire carried that Wednesday with her. She married, divorced, changed hospitals, watched her younger sister have 2 children, celebrated birthdays, attended weddings, took vacations, helped hundreds of patients. From the outside, life continued. But whenever Claire disappointed someone, the old voice returned. Of course, you failed Mum too. Whenever she missed a call, her stomach tightened. Whenever her sister took too long to respond, Claire immediately called again and again. When someone she loved was sick, Claire became obsessive. She checked, reminded, monitored, called, texted. She told herself she was being caring. Her sister eventually confronted her. You know you do not have to keep checking whether everyone is alive. Claire froze. Her sister regretted the words immediately. I am sorry. Claire stood up. No, you are right. Claire, I said you are right. She left before she cried. That night, she listened to her mother's voicemail for the second time in 9 years. Hi, honey, just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. Claire sat on the floor and covered her face. The sentence that hurt most was not her mother's. It was her own. You should have answered. She had said it so many times that it no longer sounded like a thought. It sounded like a verdict. Several months later, the hospital offered a mindfulness program for medical staff experiencing burnout. Claire enrolled because attendance counted toward professional wellness credits. She expected breathing exercises, stress management, maybe information about sleep. During the 3rd session, the instructor, an older woman named Ruth, spoke about compassion. Claire almost stopped listening. Compassion was not new to her. She practiced it every day. Then Ruth said, some people use compassion as something they give away but never allow themselves to receive. Claire looked up. Ruth continued, it is possible to become very skilled at understanding everyone except yourself. Claire felt uncomfortable. She crossed her arms. Ruth asked the group to close their eyes. Think of someone you have judged harshly for a long time. Claire immediately thought of herself, not her ex-husband, not the physician who had humiliated her years earlier, not the friend who disappeared after her divorce. Herself, 36 years old, standing in a hospital hallway, looking at her mother's name on a phone, choosing not to answer. Ruth continued, now imagine that person sitting across from you. Claire saw herself clearly, tired, hair pulled back, scrubs wrinkled, eyes exhausted, phone in hand. Then Ruth said, before you say anything to that person, remember that they did not know then what you know now. Claire's breathing changed. She wanted to open her eyes. She did not. Now speak to them the way you would speak to someone you deeply love. Claire felt anger rise. No, she did not deserve kindness. She had made the choice. She had seen the call. She had ignored it. Ruth's voice continued, if this person made a mistake, compassion does not require you to pretend otherwise. Compassion simply asks whether punishment is still useful. Claire's eyes opened. The room blurred. After the session, she waited until everyone left, then approached Ruth. What if the person really did something wrong? Ruth nodded. Then they should take responsibility. What if they cannot fix it? Then they should learn. What if learning does not feel like enough? Ruth studied her face. How long have you been punishing yourself? Claire looked away. 9 years. Has the punishment changed the past? No. Has it brought your mother back? Claire's eyes filled. No. Has it made you more loving? Claire wanted to say yes. Then she thought about the fear, the checking, the control, the way every unanswered text became an emergency. No. Ruth spoke softly. Then perhaps the punishment has finished its job. Claire shook her head. You do not understand. Probably not completely. I ignored her call. Ruth waited. Claire continued. My mother called me on the last day of her life, and I was too busy to answer. Ruth did not rush to reassure her. That mattered. She simply asked, if your closest friend told you that story, what would you say to her? Claire answered immediately. I would say she was exhausted. She was working. She did not know. Would you tell her she deserved 9 years of suffering? No. Would you tell her one missed call erased every other moment she gave her mother? Claire started crying. No. Ruth leaned closer. Then why is cruelty more truthful when it is directed at you? Claire had no answer. That night, she drove to her sister's house. Her sister opened the door and immediately looked worried. Is everything okay? Claire almost laughed. There I go again. What? Everything always has to be an emergency. Her sister let her in. They sat together. Claire said, I need to ask you something about Mum. Her sister's expression changed. Okay, do you think she knew I loved her? Her sister stared at her. Claire, just answer. Of course she did. How do you know? Because you showed her for 36 years. Claire looked down. Her sister continued. You took her to appointments. You called her every Sunday. You spent Christmas at her house because she hated driving in snow. You fought with her. You apologized. You sent her stupid pictures from work. You sat with her after Grandma died. Claire began crying again. Her sister took her hand. Why are you letting one missed call speak louder than an entire relationship? The question entered a place no reassurance had reached. One missed call. An entire relationship. Claire suddenly saw what guilt had done. It had compressed decades of love into 90 seconds of absence. It had taken one moment and declared itself the only moment that mattered. A week later, Claire listened to the voicemail again. This time she did not stop after her mother's words. She let the silence afterward continue. Then she spoke. I am sorry I did not answer. Her voice broke. I wish I had. She waited. I would answer now. Another pause. But I did love you. Claire closed her eyes. And I think you knew. Nothing miraculous happened. The guilt did not disappear, but it changed. For the first time, Claire could hold regret without turning it into a weapon. She still wished she had answered. Self-forgiveness did not require her to pretend otherwise. She could wish the past had been different, and still stop sentencing herself for being unable to change it. Over the following months, Claire began noticing how often guilt appeared in other forms. When she rested, a voice called her selfish. When she said no, a voice called her uncaring. When she could not save a patient, a voice told her she should have done more. She began asking a question Ruth had given her. Would I speak this way to someone I love? Sometimes the answer stopped her immediately. Other times it did not. The old habit was strong, but Claire had learned something. Compassion was not the absence of accountability. It was accountability without hatred. She could say, I made a mistake, without saying, I am a mistake. She could say, I wish I had been there, without saying, I deserve to suffer forever because I was not. She could remember her mother without turning memory into a courtroom. One Sunday, Claire drove to the cemetery. She sat beside her mother's grave and played the voicemail one final time. Hi, honey. Just checking in. Call me when you get a chance. Claire smiled through tears. I took a little longer than I expected. She placed the phone in her bag. For the first time in 9 years, she did not replay the moment when she failed to answer. She remembered another moment instead. Her mother dancing badly in the kitchen. Another, her mother falling asleep during movies. Another, her mother arguing with cashiers over coupons. Another, her mother holding Claire after her first serious heartbreak. The relationship became larger again, large enough to contain one missed phone call. In Buddhist teaching, compassion is incomplete when it excludes the person practicing it. We speak often about forgiving others, but sometimes the person we imprison most harshly is the person we used to be. The Buddhist path does not ask us to erase responsibility. It asks us to see clearly. A mistake happened. Regret is here. Pain is here. But hatred does not have to be added. The past cannot receive our punishment. Only the present can. Every day Claire condemned herself. Her mother did not suffer. Claire did. Every night she replayed that Wednesday. The past did not change. Only another living moment disappeared into it. Self-forgiveness did not mean saying the missed call did not matter. It meant understanding that love was bigger than the worst moment she could remember. Claire had spent 9 years believing that continuing to hurt herself was proof that her mother mattered. What she finally learned was quieter and kinder. Love does not ask us to become the second victim of a loss. Sometimes the deepest apology we can offer the past is to learn from it, to love more carefully now, to answer when we can, to listen when someone is here, and when we fail, as every human being eventually will, to remember that compassion was never meant only for everyone else. Claire could not answer her mother's final call, but 9 years later, she finally answered something else. The part of herself that had been asking all along whether she was still worthy of love. And for the first time, she said yes. Robert Hayes checked the weather forecast 11 times on the day his daughter told him she was moving to California. Not because the weather mattered, because checking things made him feel like he was doing something. Robert was 52 and owned a commercial printing company in northern New Jersey. He had built the business from a single rented machine and 2 employees into a company that served hospitals, law firms, universities, and regional businesses across 3 states. People trusted Robert because he prepared for everything. He had backup suppliers, backup generators, backup delivery companies, backup employees trained for critical roles. He kept emergency cash in 3 different accounts. His home had 2 fire extinguishers on every floor. He replaced smoke detector batteries months before they needed replacing. When his children were teenagers, Robert tracked their phones. When they went to college, he checked their locations less often, but not much less. Robert called it responsibility. His wife, Melissa, called it trying to negotiate with the future. Robert did not find that funny. Planning is why we have what we have, he would tell her. Melissa never argued with that. Robert's planning had protected them many times. It had helped them survive recessions. It had helped them manage medical bills when Melissa needed surgery. It had helped keep the company alive when a major client suddenly disappeared. Planning was useful. That was exactly why Robert never noticed when usefulness became fear. Every morning, before getting out of bed, he checked the weather, then the stock market, then business email, then local traffic, then the news, then his bank accounts. At breakfast, he checked the day's calendar. At work, he monitored sales. At lunch, he checked the news again. Before leaving the office, he checked tomorrow's forecast. Before bed, he read financial headlines and searched for anything that might threaten the business. Recession, inflation, interest rates, artificial intelligence, supply chains, political instability, another pandemic. Anything could happen. Robert believed information made him safer, but the strange thing was that the more information he collected, the less safe he felt. Every answer revealed another question. Every forecast contained uncertainty. Every expert disagreed with another expert. Every plan required another contingency. Robert had spent decades trying to reach the point where he knew enough to relax. He never arrived. Then his daughter Emily called on a Sunday afternoon. Emily was 27 and worked in pharmaceutical sales in Philadelphia. She had always been cautious. That made Robert comfortable. Good job, good insurance, retirement plan, apartment within driving distance. Everything made sense. Can I tell you something without you immediately explaining why it is a bad idea? She asked. Robert laughed. That depends on the idea. Dad, fine. Tell me. I got an offer from a company in San Diego. Robert sat forward. What company? I knew you would ask that first. Of course I'm asking. Emily gave him the name. Robert recognized it. How much are they offering? Dad, that is relevant. It is more than I make now. How much more? Emily sighed. Can I finish? Robert forced himself to remain quiet. I am thinking about taking it. His mind began moving immediately. California. Taxes. Housing costs. Earthquakes. Wildfires. Distance. New employer. No family nearby. What do you mean thinking about it? I mean I might go. Robert stood up. When? In 2 months. 2 months? Melissa looked over from the other side of the room. Robert began pacing. Have you looked at rent? Yes. Do you know what California taxes are? Yes. What happens if the company restructures? I do not know. Exactly. Emily became quiet. Robert continued. What about health insurance? They have health insurance. Have you compared the plan? No. Do you know anyone there? One person. One person? Dad. What about your lease? I can end it. What about your car? My car also works in California. Robert ignored the joke. Have you researched the neighborhood? Yes. Crime statistics? There was silence. Then Emily said, This is why I did not want to tell you. Robert stopped walking. I am trying to help. No. You are trying to make me afraid enough to stay. That is ridiculous. Is it? I am asking reasonable questions. You always have another reasonable question. Robert felt defensive. Someone has to think ahead. I do think ahead. Then you understand how risky this is. Emily's voice changed. Dad, do you actually know that my life will go badly if I move? Robert opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Emily continued. Or are you just afraid because you cannot see what happens next? The question angered him. That is an irresponsible way to look at life. I did not say I should ignore risk. Then what are you saying? I am saying I cannot make every decision based on whether you can guarantee the ending. Robert looked at Melissa. She was pretending not to listen. Emily said, I love you, but I am not asking you for permission. The call ended badly. Robert spent the rest of the afternoon researching San Diego, median rent, crime rates, state taxes, job market, earthquake probabilities, wildfire maps. He created a spreadsheet without consciously deciding to create one. Melissa found him at the dining table 3 hours later. What are you doing? Looking at the numbers. For Emily? Someone should. Melissa sat across from him. Did she ask you to? No. Then who is the spreadsheet for? Robert looked at her. What does that mean? Is it for Emily? She paused. Or is it for your anxiety? Robert closed the laptop. I am not anxious. Melissa nodded slowly. Of course not. Robert hated when she did that. For the next week, he barely discussed Emily's move, but he thought about it constantly. He imagined her being laid off, running out of money, getting sick without family nearby, being alone during an emergency. He imagined earthquakes because California had earthquakes. He imagined fires because he had seen fires on television. He imagined her regretting everything and being too embarrassed to come home. By Thursday, Emily had already failed in California 17 different ways. She had not even accepted the job yet. That Saturday, Melissa convinced Robert to attend a mindfulness workshop at a local community center. She had been going for several months. Robert usually called it her quiet sitting thing. You need this more than I do, she told him. I am fine. You checked whether our flight in October is delayed yesterday. Robert frowned. Airlines change schedules. The flight is 4 months away. I like to stay informed. Melissa smiled. Come with me. Robert agreed mostly because he wanted the conversation to end. The workshop was led by a Buddhist teacher named Daniel Wu. Daniel was in his 60s and spoke without any urgency. That alone made Robert suspicious. People who spoke slowly usually had fewer responsibilities. At least that was Robert's theory. Daniel began talking about uncertainty. Robert paid more attention. Much of our suffering, Daniel said, comes from demanding certainty from a life that has never offered it. Robert raised his hand. I do not think uncertainty is always something we should accept. Daniel nodded. I agree. Robert had expected resistance. You do? Of course. If a bridge is unsafe, investigate it. If your finances are unstable, make a plan. If you are sick, seek treatment. Robert nodded. Exactly, Daniel continued. Preparation is wisdom when it helps us respond to reality. Then he looked at Robert. It becomes suffering when we use preparation to demand a guarantee reality cannot provide. Robert shifted in his chair. After the session, he approached Daniel. I have a question. Daniel smiled. I suspected you might. My daughter wants to move across the country for a job. Daniel waited. It might be a bad decision. It might. Robert paused. Most people tried to reassure him. Daniel did not. It could also be a good decision. It could. That is the problem. Daniel smiled slightly. What is? I do not know. Yes. Robert frowned. No. I mean, I do not know what is going to happen. Correct. Robert became irritated. How do you make peace with that? Daniel answered immediately. By noticing that certainty was never yours in the first place. Robert stared at him. That sounds nice. But people need plans. Yes. So we agree. Planning and certainty are not the same thing. Robert crossed his arms. Daniel pointed toward a table. There was tea. Would you like some? Sure. Daniel poured a cup and handed it to him. Robert took a sip. Daniel asked, Will you finish that tea? Robert looked at the cup. Probably. I did not ask probably. Robert almost laughed. Yes. Certainly. Unless something happens. Daniel smiled. Exactly. Robert looked at him. That is a ridiculous example. Is it? I am standing here holding tea, and still you cannot guarantee the next 5 minutes. Robert had no answer. Daniel continued. You can intend to finish the tea. He pointed toward the cup. You can hold it carefully. You can avoid spilling it. You can choose not to walk into traffic while drinking it. Robert smiled despite himself. All useful planning. Yes, but none of those things turn the future into something you own. Robert looked down at the tea. For some reason, this irritated him more than philosophical language would have. It was too obvious. Daniel said, You are not afraid because you lack information. Robert looked up. You are afraid because information cannot do what you want it to do. What do I want it to do? Promise you that the people you love will be safe. Robert stopped smiling. Daniel's voice softened. No amount of information can make that promise. Robert thought about Emily, his son, Melissa, the business, his own health. He had built systems around all of them. Maybe part of him believed that if the systems were good enough, nothing could be taken from him. What am I supposed to do instead? Daniel answered, Prepare wisely. Then stop. When preparation becomes rehearsal for disaster. Robert said nothing. Daniel continued, Ask yourself, is there an action available right now? If there is, take it. And if there is not, notice the mind trying to live in a future that does not exist yet. Robert drove home quietly. That evening, he opened the spreadsheet about Emily. He looked at everything he had collected. Rent, insurance, taxes, savings, employment statistics. Some of it was useful. Most of it was fear wearing the clothing of research. He called Emily. She answered cautiously. Hi, I want to apologize. Silence. Robert continued. I still think you should look carefully at the numbers. Emily laughed. There he is. Let me finish. Okay. I realized I am mixing two things together. What things? Helping you prepare and trying to make you certain. Emily said nothing. Robert continued. I cannot make you certain. No, I cannot even make myself certain. No, and I think that scares me. Emily's voice softened. I know. Robert took a breath. I still have concerns. I know, but I think some of them belong to my fear, not your future. Emily was quiet for several seconds. Then she said, That might be the most honest thing you have ever said to me. Robert laughed. I do not know whether to be offended. You should not. They talked for another hour. This time Robert asked different questions. What excited you about the job? What are you hoping to learn? What are you most nervous about? What support would help? He still asked about insurance. He was still Robert, but he was finally talking to his daughter instead of interrogating the future. Emily accepted the job. 2 months later, Robert and Melissa helped her move. On the flight home, turbulence shook the plane. Robert gripped the armrest. His mind immediately began. What if it gets worse? What if there is a mechanical problem? What if this is not normal? He almost opened the flight tracker. Then he remembered Daniel. Is there an action available right now? No. Robert felt his feet against the floor. He noticed his hands. He breathed. The turbulence continued. He did not tell himself everything would definitely be fine. That would have been another demand for certainty. Instead, He said quietly inside himself, "I do not know what happens next." For once, the sentence did not feel terrifying. It felt true, and because it was true, he did not have to keep arguing with it. Months passed. Emily struggled at first. The job was harder than expected. Her first apartment had plumbing problems. She became homesick. Robert's old voice immediately wanted to say, "Come home. I knew this would happen." Instead, he listened. Then things changed. Emily made friends, earned a promotion, started hiking, called home laughing about problems that once would have frightened Robert. Was moving to California the right decision? Robert eventually realized he still could not answer that question. It was simply her life, still unfolding, just like his. Robert did not stop planning. His company still had backup suppliers. The smoke detector batteries were still replaced early. He still checked weather forecasts, more than Melissa considered reasonable. But he began practicing 3 words that once felt almost impossible. I do not know. When the market dropped, I do not know what it means yet. When his doctor ordered another test, I do not know what the result will be. When his son considered changing careers, I do not know whether it will work. The words did not make Robert passive. They made him more accurate. He could respond to what was known without pretending to possess what was not. In Buddhist practice, this openness is sometimes described through beginner's mind, a mind willing to meet reality before covering it with conclusions. It does not mean becoming careless. It does not mean refusing preparation. It means remembering that a plan is a plan, not a prophecy. We can save money without guaranteeing security. We can care for our health without guaranteeing longevity. We can raise children carefully without controlling the lives they will eventually choose. We can love someone deeply without knowing how long they will remain beside us. Robert had spent decades believing uncertainty was a problem he could eventually solve. But uncertainty was not a defect in life. It was part of life, and much of his anxiety came not from the unknown itself, but from demanding that the unknown reveal itself before he was willing to relax. The future had never promised him an explanation. It had only ever arrived one moment at a time. One morning, one phone call, one choice, one breath, one cup of tea he might finish, or might not. Robert still preferred answers, but he no longer needed an answer for every unfinished question. Sometimes he could simply say, "I have prepared what I can. I will respond when the next moment comes. And until then, I am here." Because peace is not knowing that everything will turn out exactly as you hope. Peace is knowing that you do not have to see the entire road before taking the step that is beneath your feet. You do not need tomorrow to explain itself before you are allowed to live today. For 11 months after his wife died, George Miller set the dinner table for 2. Every night, 1 plate for himself, 1 plate for Evelyn. George was 69 and lived in a small town outside Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. He and Evelyn had been married for 43 years. They had raised 2 daughters, survived layoffs, buried parents, moved houses 3 times, fought about money, fought about directions, fought about whether the thermostat should be set at 68 or 70, then laughed about almost all of it later. They had lived together so long that George no longer knew where his habits ended and Evelyn's began. She made coffee first. He fed the dog. She opened the curtains. He checked the weather. She complained that he always checked the weather, even though looking outside would tell him almost the same thing. He complained that she left cabinet doors open. She complained that he left shoes everywhere. Every evening at 6:30, they ate dinner together, even when they were angry, even when one of them did not feel like talking. 2 plates, 2 glasses, 2 chairs, facing each other. Then Evelyn got sick. At first, they were told not to panic. Then they were told treatment would be difficult. Then they were told the treatment was not working. Eventually, a doctor sat across from them and began speaking more slowly. George hated when doctors spoke slowly. Slow meant bad news. Evelyn squeezed his hand under the table. George asked every question he could think of. New treatments, clinical trials, different hospitals. different specialists, different medications. He wanted a door, any door. The doctor did not give him one. 6 months later, Evelyn died. At home, George was sitting beside her. Her breathing had been shallow most of the night. He counted the seconds between each breath. Then one breath came, and the next one did not. George waited. 5 seconds. 10, 20. He leaned closer. Evelyn? Nothing. He knew what had happened. But knowing and accepting were not the same thing. Evelyn? He said her name again, as though she might be somewhere nearby and simply had not heard him. After the funeral, people filled the house. Food arrived. Flowers arrived. Cards arrived. Friends sat in the living room and told stories. Everyone said some version of the same thing. She was wonderful. You were lucky to have so many years together. She is at peace now. Take care of yourself. George thanked them. He did not know what else to say. Then everyone went home. That was when the real silence began. The first morning alone, George woke at 6:12. He reached across the bed. His hand found nothing. For several seconds, he forgot, then remembered. That became the cruelest part. Not remembering, remembering, not remembering, remembering. Every morning, grief arrived fresh. George walked into the kitchen. He made coffee, 2 cups. He did not notice until both were on the counter. He stared at them, then poured one down the sink. That evening, George cooked soup. He took 2 bowls from the cabinet. He stopped. His chest tightened. He considered putting one back. He could not. So he filled both bowls, sat down, ate facing an empty chair. The soup in Evelyn's bowl became cold. George threw it away afterward. The next night, he set 2 plates again. It made no sense. He knew that. But setting 1 plate felt worse. 1 plate said something George was not ready to hear. 1 plate said this was no longer temporary. 1 plate said she was not coming back. So every evening, George placed Evelyn's plate across from him. Her chair remained where it had always been. Her favorite blue mug stayed in the cabinet. Her coat remained by the front door. Her reading glasses stayed on the side table. Her slippers stayed beside the bed. His daughters tried to help carefully. His oldest daughter, Megan, asked one afternoon, "Dad, do you want us to go through Mum's clothes with you?" "No." "Not now?" "No." "Okay." A month later, she asked again. George became angry. Why is everyone in such a hurry to erase her? Megan looked hurt. "We are not trying to erase her." "Then stop asking." She did. George immediately regretted his tone, but he did not apologize. Apologizing would have required opening the conversation again. Instead, he became very good at being alone. At least that was what he told himself. He watched baseball, went grocery shopping, paid bills, walked the dog, attended church occasionally. People invited him to dinner. He usually declined. He had an answer ready. "I am doing okay." It was easier than explaining that he did not know what okay was supposed to mean anymore. Months passed. The house became a museum. Nothing moved. George stopped sleeping on Evelyn's side of the bed, stopped using her mug, stopped sitting in her chair. He preserved absence like it was something fragile. Then one morning, Megan arrived with her 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. George loved Sophie in the uncomplicated way. Grandparents often love grandchildren. She asked questions adults were too careful to ask. "Why is Grandma's coat still here?" George answered. "Because that is where she kept it, but she does not need it." "No, then why do you keep it there?" George looked at Megan. Megan said, "Sophie." "What?" "Leave Grandpa alone." George forced a smile. "It is okay." Sophie ran toward the kitchen. She opened the cabinet. "Can I use Grandma's blue cup?" George answered too quickly. "No." "Sophie Froze." George softened his voice. "Use another one." "Why?" "Because that was Grandma's." Sophie looked at the cup, then at George. Will Grandma be mad? The question hit him in a place he was not prepared for. "No." "Then why can I not use it?" George had no answer. Megan stepped in. "Use the red one, honey." Sophie shrugged and took the red mug. The moment passed. But George kept thinking about it. Will Grandma be mad? Of course not. Evelyn would have laughed. She would have handed Sophie the blue mug herself. She would have said, "Things are meant to be used." George could hear her saying it. That made the cabinet feel suddenly strange. He had been protecting Evelyn's belongings from life, as though keeping them untouched kept her closer. 2 weeks later, Megan convinced him to attend a grief support group held at a local Buddhist center. George resisted immediately. "I am not Buddhist. You do not have to be. I do not meditate. You do not have to. I do not want to sit in a circle talking about my feelings." Megan sighed. "Then sit in a circle and say nothing." George almost smiled. He went because she looked tired of worrying about him. The group was led by a Buddhist chaplain named Arun. George expected advice. Arun gave very little. Mostly, he listened. People talked about husbands, wives, children, parents. A woman cried while describing her brother. A man said he still sent text messages to his dead son. Nobody acted as if this were strange. When it was George's turn, he said, "My wife died 11 months ago." Arun nodded. George waited. Nothing. He continued, "We were married 43 years. Another nod. George said, "I still set her place at the table." He expected someone to tell him he needed to move on. Nobody did. Arun asked, "What happens if you do not?" George looked at him. "What? If you set only one place? What happens?" George answered, after a long pause. "It feels like I am letting her go." Arun asked, "And what does letting her go mean?" George's voice tightened. "Leaving her behind." Arun nodded. "Do you want to leave her behind?" "No." "Then perhaps that is not what letting go means." George became irritated. What else could it mean? Arun thought for a moment. "Imagine holding a bird you love." George frowned. "What does that have to do with anything? If you love the bird, do you squeeze it tightly so it cannot leave?" "No." "Why not? You would hurt it." Arun nodded. "Sometimes grief is the hand that is afraid to open." George looked away. He did not like metaphors. Metaphors felt too neat for what had happened. Then Arun said something simpler. "Letting go does not mean loving less." George looked back. "It means allowing love to change form." That sentence followed George home. Allowing love to change form. He did not understand it, but he could not dismiss it either. The next evening, George set 2 places again. He looked at Evelyn's plate. For the first time, he asked himself what he was actually protecting. Left or himself. He ate in silence. The second plate remained untouched. A week later, Sophie came for dinner. Megan had an appointment and asked George to watch her. George made spaghetti. Sophie helped sprinkle cheese on top. Then she ran to the table. George carried the plates. Before he reached the table, he saw Sophie sitting in Evelyn's chair. His entire body tightened. "Not there." Sophie looked up. "What?" "Sit in the other chair." "Why?" George stopped. The answer came automatically. "That is Grandma's chair." Sophie looked at the empty place beside her, then at George. "But Grandma is not here." The words were innocent. They did not contain cruelty. That made them harder to hear. George felt anger, then grief, then something beneath both. Fear. If Sophie sat there, something would change. The room would change. The ritual would change. Evelyn would become more absent. George opened his mouth. Then he imagined Evelyn watching him protect an empty chair from her own granddaughter. He heard her voice again. "Things are meant to be used." George put the plates down. Sophie started to stand. "Sorry, Grandpa." George looked at her. "No." She stopped. "Stay there." "Are you sure?" George swallowed. "Yeah." He sat across from her. For the first few minutes, he could barely eat. Sophie swung her feet under the chair, the same chair Evelyn had occupied for decades. Then Sophie began talking about school. A boy named Marcus had eaten glue. A teacher had accidentally called another teacher Mom. Someone had lost a tooth during gym class. George listened. Then, without warning, Sophie laughed. The sound filled the kitchen. George looked at the chair. For 11 months, he had thought keeping it empty honored Evelyn. Now a child was laughing in it. And somehow, instead of losing Evelyn, George remembered her more clearly. Evelyn laughing so hard she snorted. Evelyn telling terrible jokes. Evelyn giving Sophie too much dessert. Evelyn saying, "Do not tell your mother." George began to laugh too. Then he cried. Sophie became worried. "Did I do something wrong?" George shook his head. "No, sweetheart." "Then why are you crying?" He wiped his face. "Because I miss Grandma." Sophie thought about this, then said, "I miss her too." George nodded. They kept eating. That night, after Sophie went home, George stood in the kitchen. He picked up Evelyn's plate. His hand trembled slightly. He opened the cabinet, put it inside. One plate remained on the table. George stared at it. The room felt different. The loss did not become larger. It was already as large as it could be. Instead, something else appeared. Space, not emptiness. Space. The next morning, George opened the cabinet and took out Evelyn's blue mug. He made coffee, then called Megan. "Bring Sophie over this weekend." Megan sounded surprised. "Okay, and tell her she can use the blue mug." There was silence. Then Megan said softly, "Okay, Dad." Over the next several months, George began changing the house. Slowly, he donated some of Evelyn's clothes, kept others. He gave her gardening tools to a neighbor who had always admired them. He kept her wedding ring in a small box. He moved her reading glasses from the side table into a drawer, not because he wanted to forget, because he no longer needed every object to remain frozen at the moment she left. One day, he packed the coat by the door. He held it against his chest before placing it in a donation bag. He cried, then smiled. "You always hated this coat anyway." That evening, George ate alone. One plate, one glass, one chair occupied. But he no longer felt that the second chair had betrayed him. Evelyn was still present in ways an empty place setting had never fully captured. In the recipes she taught him, in the phrases he used without realizing they were hers, in his daughters, in Sophie's laugh, in the way he folded towels because Evelyn once told him he did it wrong. Love had not disappeared, it had moved. Months later, George returned to the Buddhist grief group. Arun asked how he was doing. George thought, "I stopped setting the second plate." Arun nodded. "How did that feel?" "Awful." Arun smiled gently. "And now?" George looked down. "Different." He paused. "I thought letting go meant losing her again. And I think I was wrong." Arun waited. George continued, "I do not think I let go of her." His voice softened. "I think I let go of needing her to still be here, in exactly the same way." Arun nodded. George smiled. "Is that Buddhist enough for you?" Arun laughed. "More than enough." In Buddhist teaching, non-attachment is often misunderstood. People hear the words and imagine coldness, distance, a refusal to love deeply. But non-attachment is not the absence of love. It is love without the impossible demand that what we love must never change. Everything we touch is impermanent. Every body changes. Every relationship changes. Every season ends. Every voice we love will one day become a memory, just as our own voice will one day disappear from the rooms where people once heard it. This truth can sound cruel, but Buddhism does not ask us to use impermanence as a reason to love less. It asks us to love more honestly, to hold what is here without pretending we can keep it forever, to appreciate without possessing, to grieve without turning grief into a permanent monument where life is no longer allowed to enter. George had believed the empty chair proved his loyalty, but love did not need an empty chair. Love did not need untouched clothes. Love did not need a second plate growing cold every night. Love needed memory, gratitude, presence, and the courage to let living people sit down at the table. Grief did not disappear when George stopped setting Evelyn's place. Some mornings still hurt. Some anniversaries were unbearable. Sometimes he reached across the bed before remembering. Sometimes he heard a song in a grocery store. and had to leave before anyone saw him cry. Healing did not mean those moments stopped happening. It meant George stopped treating them as evidence that he was failing. Grief was not a disease to defeat. It was love learning a new language. One evening, nearly 2 years after Evelyn died, the family gathered for dinner. Megan was there. His younger daughter was there. Sophie was there. The table was crowded. George carried in the last dish. There were not enough chairs. Sophie pointed toward the chair she now used every time she visited. "Grandpa, I saved Grandma's chair for me." George looked at her. For half a second, the old pain returned. Then something warmer followed. He sat beside her. Sophie drank from the blue mug. Someone told a story about Evelyn. Everyone laughed. George laughed too. And in that moment, he finally understood what it meant for love to change form. Evelyn was not sitting across from him, but she was not gone from the table either. She was inside the stories, inside the habits, inside the laughter, inside the people who had been changed because she had once been here. George had spent almost a year trying to preserve one empty place. What he eventually learned was that letting go of the chair did not mean letting go of Evelyn. It meant making room for love to keep living. And now, as these stories come to an end, there is one thing I hope you carry with you. Not another rule, not another method to perfect, not another promise that your life will suddenly become easy. Just this: you do not have to wait for everything to be fixed before you are allowed to feel peace. You do not have to solve every problem tonight. You do not have to know what will happen next. You do not have to stop feeling fear, anger, sadness, or uncertainty in order to become a peaceful person. Throughout these stories, we met people who believed peace was somewhere else. After the next promotion, after the next solution, after the anxiety disappeared, after the difficult person changed, after the loss stopped hurting, after life became quieter, after they finally understood everything. But life rarely gives us those perfect conditions. The email still arrives. The body still changes. People still disappoint us. Plans still fail. Someone we love may leave before we are ready. There will still be nights when the mind refuses to become quiet. There will still be mornings when fear reaches us before our feet touch the floor. There will still be moments when anger rises faster than wisdom. And there will still be days when we forget everything we have learned. That does not mean we have failed. It means we are human. The Buddhist path does not ask us to become untouched by life. It teaches us how to be fully touched by life without being destroyed by every passing moment. A thought can appear without becoming a command. An emotion can rise without becoming an identity. A painful memory can remain true without being carried into every new day. A moment of uncertainty can exist without requiring us to predict the ending. And something can be deeply loved without belonging to us forever. That may be one of the hardest truths to accept. Everything changes. The people sitting beside us tonight will change. Our children will grow. Our parents will age. Our bodies will become different. The places we call home may one day belong to someone else. The problems that feel permanent now will eventually become memories. And even this moment, the one you are living while listening to these words, is already passing. But impermanence is not only a reason to grieve, it is also a reason to wake up, because the conversation you keep postponing matters precisely because there may not always be another opportunity. The person across the table deserves your attention, because one day that chair may be empty. The cup of coffee in your hands matters, because this exact morning will never return. The walk from your car to your front door matters. The sound of someone you love laughing matters. The ordinary dinner matters. The quiet 5 minutes before sleep matter. Life is not made only from the moments we photograph. Most of life happens in between them, and perhaps that is where peace has been hiding, not in a perfect future, in the ordinary moment we keep overlooking. If there is anger inside you tonight, you do not have to hate yourself for it. Listen carefully. Maybe there is a boundary that needs to be spoken. Maybe there is pain beneath it. Maybe it simply needs enough space to rise and pass, without controlling what you do next. If there is grief, You do not have to hurry it away. Grief is often love, learning how to exist after something has changed. Let it move at its own pace. If there is anxiety, notice the stories your mind is building. Ask what is actually true right now. Feel your feet. Feel the bed beneath you. Notice one breath entering. Notice one breath leaving. You do not need to win a battle against your own mind tonight. You only need to stop believing that every thought requires your participation. And if you are carrying something from the past, perhaps you can ask yourself the question, one of our stories quietly placed before us. Is the event still happening, or am I still carrying it? Letting go does not mean the wound did not matter. It does not mean what someone did was acceptable. It does not erase love, responsibility, memory, or justice. Sometimes, letting go simply means deciding that something which already took one moment of your life will not automatically receive another 1,000. You are allowed to put it down. And when you forget, because you will, begin again. That may be the most compassionate lesson of all. Begin again. One breath, one step, one meal, one conversation, one honest boundary, one moment of listening, one night in which you decide you do not have to carry tomorrow before tomorrow arrives. You do not need to become a monk. You do not need to understand every Buddhist teaching. You do not need hours of meditation. You only need enough awareness to recognize when you have left the present, and enough gentleness to return, again and again and again. Perhaps you came to this video because your mind has been tired. Perhaps work has become too heavy. Perhaps someone hurt you. Perhaps you are grieving. Perhaps you are afraid of losing something. Perhaps nothing is obviously wrong, and yet you have forgotten what it feels like to be at ease inside your own life. Whatever brought you here, I hope these stories reminded you that peace is not weakness. Slowing down is not failure. Feeling deeply is not failure. Changing your mind is not failure. Resting is not failure. And beginning again is never failure. The world will continue asking for your attention. Your phone will light up. Deadlines will arrive. News will continue. People will rush. There will always be another reason to postpone your peace. But you do not have to follow every invitation into urgency. Tonight, you can choose one breath. Tomorrow, perhaps one pause. Then one conversation in which you truly listen. One meal you actually taste. One walk in which you feel the ground beneath your feet. Small moments. That is how a different life begins. Not dramatically, quietly. If these stories gave you something worth carrying forward, I would love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me which story stayed with you the most. Was it the story about letting go, impermanence, anxiety, anger, loss, slowing down, or learning to be present again? And if there is a Buddhist teaching, a Zen story, an emotional struggle, or a part of life you would like us to explore in the next video, leave that in the comments as well. Your suggestions may help shape the next journey we take together. Thank you for giving me your time. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are right now, I hope you give yourself permission to stop carrying everything for a little while. Let your shoulders soften. Let the day be finished. Let tomorrow remain tomorrow. For this moment, you are here, and this moment is enough. Take care of yourself. Sleep peacefully if you are heading to rest. And until we meet again in the next story, may you walk a little more slowly, hold life a little more gently, and remember to return to yourself whenever the world pulls you away. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.